The island is beautiful. Situated in Tierraforden, a lake inside the county of Busket, Norway, it's an incredibly peaceful place where violence is, or at least was, almost completely unheard of. Utøya was a little heart-shaped piece of paradise, with freshly mowed lawns and a pleasant, picturesque campground set amongst dense pine trees and rocky beaches with a small pier and neat buildings. Back in the 1800s, the island was a croft, a Scottish term for a fenced or enclosed parcel of land, typically for farming, before politician Jens Bratlie bought it in 1893. He would use it for 4 decades as his summer residence until 1933, when it was then purchased by the Trade Union Confederation. And then in 1950, the Trade Union Confederation gave the island as a gift to Norway's Labour Party, who would begin holding summer camps for their youth organization, the Workers' Youth League, or the AUF. It seemed like the ideal spot to gather a bunch of teens, and for decades it truly was. After getting their bags checked for alcohol and drugs, teens would take the old ferry, a former military landing craft, over to the island and be greeted by cheerful young counselors, many of them teens as well, who were just a year or two older than the campers themselves. Teens who have been coming to the camp now for several years. Once on the island, kids might head to listen to a lecture given by some government minister, or go to a debate, or simply sit around talking about what they wanted the future to look like, the future of Norway, the future of Europe, the future of the planet. Young idealists hungry to make the world a better place. What a beautiful thing. And their time on the island wouldn't only be serious. They were still, after all, a bunch of kids. They'd also sing karaoke, go swimming, they'd play football, hold hands, or shyly sneak away for kisses or more for some summer romances. The older ones, senior leaders in their early 20s, looked after the younger ones, some as young as 14. So many wonderful memories, built for so long. But on July 22nd, 2011, the utopia this island had offered kids for over half a century was shattered and forever stained. The first sign that something was wrong in Norway that day came from Oslo, 40 minutes away by car. That afternoon, someone had driven a van to the Tower Block, a government complex that held the Prime Minister's offices, and detonated a massive bomb, crumbling parts of the building, killing 8 and injuring over 200 others. On the island, once news of the blast reached it, some of the kids nervously called home, hoping their parents or friends didn't happen to be in the city center that day. The camp's directors reassured them that there would still be a bonfire that night and that everyone would get to eat as much sausage as they wanted. Yes, it was horrible what had happened in Oslo, but they were still okay. Everything was going to be okay for them. They were safe. But was that really true? The kids mumbled nervously. One 18-year-old drew a scary connection. The Prime Minister was from the Labour Party, and they were all at a huge gathering for the Labour Party. And whoever had detonated that bomb was still at large. What if something happened on the island? What if it would be part of some kind of coordinated attack? But then an armed officer showed up on the island, or at least someone the kids assumed was an officer. Everyone breathed a collective sigh of relief when this man dressed in a police uniform showed up to protect them, promising that 2 more police officers were on their way and would be there soon. A few counselors were a bit suspicious. Nobody had told them about the police coming. But then again, Oslo was in chaos. It would turn out that they were right to be suspicious. The policeman was no policeman at all. He was a 32-year-old, delusioned, angry, racist, mentally unwell failure of a man named Anders Breivik, an alt-right gamer who believed that Norway was being taken over by Muslim immigrants and that he was going to save his nation from losing its culture. He saw himself as a noble white knight, not as a cold-blooded, delusional killer of unarmed, innocent children as he walked up to the grassy hill on Utoya, looking for all the world like a man who was sworn to protect. But then, he opened fire. And we share this tragic story today on another true crime, misguided mass murderer. If you see yourself as being the opposite of what the world sees when they look at you, maybe the world is right edition of Timesuck.
This is Michael McDonald, and you're listening to Timesuck.
You're listening to Timesuck.
Well, happy Monday and welcome to the Cult of the Curious. I'm Dan Cummins, the master sucker. Cracker still feeling pretty inspired by Nelson Mandela, guy who had no idea there were so many people named Blaze who listen to the show. And you are listening to Timesuck. One quick announcement this week and then we are off. The 2025 Cummins Family Scholarship is now open for applications. This year, we're able to give 4 different $5,000 scholarships to members of the Bad Magic community. We are continuing to work with Scholarship America to help make the process smooth and fair. Head on over to badmagicproductions.com, click the Bad Magic Family tab in the top right corner of the screen, choose the scholarship tab, and then get started. The application process will close on April 22nd, and it is now open to Canadians as well. Big thanks to anyone and everyone who have supported us on Patreon over the years to help make this happen. You make this scholarship possible, Space Lizards, and I thank you very much. And now, we are about to head to Norway. But first, small note on today's Norwegian pronunciations. Holy fuck, I forgot how challenging for me the Norwegian language is. Even though I spent literally thousands of hours hearing my great-grandmother speak Norwegian growing up, literally nothing sunk in. Absolutely nothing. I looked up a lot of words this week, heard a lot of native speakers say them over and over, and frequently came to the conclusion of, nope, this mouth don't move that way. And how did those letters equal that sound? And also, what the fuck even is that letter? So if you're looking for a guide on how to properly pronounce the names of Norwegian places and people, this ain't for you. I feel like I came close on a lot of them, though. But on others, admittedly, totally guessing. So apologies, Norwegian suckers. My butchering of your native tongue does not come from any place of disrespect. Just didn't have quite enough time this week to spend several years attempting to become fluent in your hoingy boingy, oofta language. So impressed that almost all of you speak your very complicated words, to me at least, so beautifully. And also speak English better than me and a lot of Americans. And often speak a few other languages as well. Well done. I can also attest, after traveling to Norway almost 2 years ago now, that you live in an incredible country. A really beautiful country. Still think about your softest ice cream. Fuck. Why is it so good? A land so rugged and wild, featuring mountains, fjords, waterfalls, glaciers, much more, all maintained and protected by a government that actually truly works for the people. What a wild concept. Norway consistently ranks, I've been fascinated for years about this, consistently ranks among the highest in the world as far as countries as far as standards of living, excellent public services, low crime rates, strong social welfare system, just happiness. Norwegian citizens do not need health insurance. No big evil pharma to have to deal with. How about that? If you want it, you can get it. You can jump the line, so to speak, and get certain procedures a bit faster. But if you don't have it, you only pay what amounts to a nominal deductible each year, and then everything else is free. You don't have to choose between surviving cancer or going bankrupt. If you're pregnant or 16 and under, you don't pay shit ever for any medical procedures. No tests, no checkups, fucking nothing. And you get better health care than we get here in the U.S. You'll see a doctor faster, and your doctor, on average, will be better at doctoring, which has led to a better life expectancy for the average Norwegian citizen and to lower infant mortality rates than here in the U.S. What? Getting better health care than you get here in the U.S., a nation where you pay thousands a year in private insurance and thousands more if you actually get sick, and getting it for either free or damn near free. Is that really true? Oh, it sure is. Also in Norway, fathers are entitled to 10 weeks of paid paternal leave, and new mothers can take up to 59 weeks of paid maternity leave at 80% pay, 80% of their full pay, or 49 weeks at full pay. In the U.S., the U.S. has no federal law that guarantees literally even a day of paid maternity or maternity leave. Why is that? Well, corporate lobbyists making sure Wall Street profits come before families and happiness, maybe. Higher education in Norway, tuition is free for all Norwegian citizens. And I could go on and on. Better pensions, better social welfare programs, better lives. But they pay more in taxes, don't they? Nope. That's a bunch of propaganda. Norway's income tax tops out at 39%. America's tops out at 46.8% once you combine state and federal taxes. And again, I could go on. There are so many reasons why Norway consistently ranks way higher than the U.S. in every and any quality of life index you can find. The U.S. and World Report's most recent rankings based on broad access to food, housing, quality education, healthcare, employment, job security, political stability, individual freedom, environmental quality, overall fucking happiness. Norway's 4th in the world. U.S., 21st. Right behind Italy. Yeah, even Italy, where you can go to prison even if there's not a shred of evidence you've committed any crime because the magistrate thinks you might be a devil worshiper who has to have done something. Less of a shit show when it comes to citizens actually enjoying their lives in America. Man, what the fuck? But I digress. I just like to share facts like that when I can because I care about my fellow citizens and would love to see them be taken care of. Here in the U.S., Norwegians are taken care of. Norway, a place known for peace and prosperity, the envy of much of the world when it comes to individual happiness, at least when you're not talking about the weather. It can easily look like a paradise, a place where the divisiveness, the stress and tension of politics in places like the U.S. and most of the Western world right now doesn't reach. But that's not always true. According to University of Oslo professor of social anthropology, Thomas Eriksson, there is a fundamental tension in the middle of Norwegian society, or has been for years, Norwegian nationalism, influenced by a national narrative of a country founded on the premise of ethnic and cultural homogeneity. That word is tricky, and it's in English. On one hand, and by values associated with inclusion and equality on the other. And I will admit, it has been much easier for Norway to be an inclusive nation than it has been for the massive melting pot of a country like the U.S. Pretty easy historically to tout the virtues of equality when you live in a nation where everyone looks like you. But that started to change in the 1980s when Norway became home to more and more asylum seekers, beginning with waves of refugees from countries like Iran, Chile, Iraq, Vietnam, former Yugoslavia. The percentage of immigrants living in Norway increased from only 3% in 1970 to nearly 23% in 2017. And unlike in other European countries, France and Sweden in particular, where immigrants were pushed into ghettos where crime proliferated and integration seemed impossible, leading to the rise of parallel societies, things did not go that way in Norway. While Sweden, which would see immigrant gang riots in 2013, had the fewest low-wage entry-level jobs in Europe at that time, Norway seemed to make sure that its immigrants had jobs and material comforts, giving them a lot less incentive to turn to crime. Immigrants in Norway have generally felt wanted and quickly assimilate into and invest in Norwegian society, so they don't want to see Norway crash and burn. That isn't to say they don't face issues when it comes to employment or wage gaps, but in general, things are better. So where does the tension come from? While you might think this integration is great for Norwegian society as a whole, to a certain kind of alt-right thinker, it is absolutely terrible. This certain kind of alt-right thinker would actually prefer that immigrants stay cloistered into ghettos because the alternative, that they might actually succeed, that their children might marry Norwegians and make a multicultural society, is truly disgusting to them. How dare someone from another country try to date the women I want to date? Women who might, God forbid, prefer them to me. How dare they compete for the jobs I want and make me have to work harder to get them? Why can't I just fuck whoever I want and get whatever job I want, regardless of how much effort I put into my appearance, personality, or work skill set? This incel-like mentality is the mentality of today's subject. Low-tier normie Melvin, Anders Breivik. What's unusual about Breivik is that he didn't actually focus his campaign of hatred on the immigrants themselves. He focused on the people he perceived had let them in. Members of the liberal government, left-leaning journalists, professors, and the like. And then when it came to his most violent acts, he focused most of his carnage on children. Kids who had come to a political summer camp. Breivik maintained that these kids were race traitors. Traitors to Norway, traitors to the Aryan race, traitors to Christianity, traitors to traditional gender roles, and everything else that he felt was perfect about the good old days. And for that, they deserved to die. In terms of how I will be sharing this story today, nothing fancy in terms of episode structure. Just going to jump into a timeline, beginning with Anders' birth, take it right up to the present day with the most recent information we have on him. As a blog poster, diary writer, all-around person obsessed with himself, Anders left a lot of material to gain insight into his fucked up evolution. And that fucked up evolution begins with his birth to a woman who had her very own demons to deal with. Let us begin.
Strap on those boots, soldier. We're marching down a Timesuck timeline.
Anders Behring Breivik, keep wanting to say Breivik, because there's a fucking E after the R, was born on February 13th, 1979, to two white Scandinavian parents. So it was his birthright to have an easy life and get everything and anything he ever wanted. If he were ever to shed a tear or feel even a hint of frustration, it would be the fault of the Browns or the Blacks or of the Beiges or of the slightly off-white or creams. but never of the pure whites. His mother was Venko Elizabeth Behring, and she had been born in the coastal town of Kragera? Kragera, to a builder and a pure white, Ulla Christian Behring, and his pure white wife, Anne Marie Behring, in 1946, one of the purest, whitest years on record. She had 2 older, pure white brothers who had been born without incidents, but with her birth, there would be problems. As the birth approached, Anne Marie started getting flu-like symptoms and was confined to bed with paralysis in her arms and legs. Many wondered, had she been secretly impregnated by a non-pure white? Had a brown tainted her? Egad, had a beige touched her belly with her alien, corrupted finger? No, it turned out she had polio, a crippling disease with no known cure. She got it before a disgusting, evil vaccine began to be developed by a nefarious scientist. Fuck you, Jonas Salk. And then it was manufactured by the Illuminati in 1955, a vaccine that poisoned children, and maybe, but definitely not, gave them autism or something instead of polio, which even if that was true, wouldn't that be better to get autism and maybe be really good at math instead of being paralyzed or dead? Prior to 1955, the polio virus killed or paralyzed over 500,000 people every year, and that's what we want again today. Anyway, Venko was delivered by C-section in 1946. By then, Anne Marie was almost completely immobile from the waist down. Venko was sent to an orphanage as soon as she was born, since she fucked her mama's legs up on purpose, and she spent the first 5 years of her life there. And that actually is really sad. At the age 5, the orphanage shut down, and Venko was brought back to live with her parents. But her father was always working, and her mother, afraid now to go in public, worried she would be mocked for her physical disabilities, locked herself in a room, and hated her children, especially her youngest daughter who, gave her polio. So, good times at home. Venko was alone most of the time while her brothers went out and did pure white bro things. She stayed in a dilapidated house with no running water. At the age of 8, her father, Ulla, died, and now Venko found herself more alone than ever and more miserable. Her mom, Anne Marie, truly did blame her for giving her polio because she was mentally insane. I don't know why I added the word mentally. I was going to say mentally unwell, and then I added in insane, which is a weird combo. She was mentally insane, as if there's a different kind of insane. She was physically insane. Her body was crazy. Anyway, but Anne Marie, did blame her for giving her polio. When she did move around, she would use 2 stools to drag herself across the floor, a sound that Venko grew to hate. In addition to being the bane of her mom's existence, Venko was required to keep things in the house in order, washing, cleaning, including the chamber pot under the bed she shared with her mom. Her 2 older brothers, they didn't have the same responsibilities. They were also quick to torment her. One left home when their father died, but the other stayed, beat her so often that the skin behind her ears was constantly raw. He also loved to thrash her legs with stinging nettles, and Venko would often hide behind the stove when her brother came home or was after her, since he couldn't reach her there. Other times, she would simply stay out of the house, even if that meant she had to wet herself because she couldn't go inside to use the bathroom. Because of this, because she was never allowed to invite anyone home, she had no friends. Her family was seen as creepy and strange by neighbors and townsfolk, people to avoid at all costs. In addition to suffering from polio, Venko's mother was also very mentally ill. She was mentally insane and physically insane. When Venko was a teenager, her mom began to complain about hearing voices in her head, and she was becoming more and more paranoid. She also expected Venko to stay and care for her the rest of her life, but Venko decided, nope, fuck that. When she was 17, 1963, she packed a suitcase and left for Oslo, and she never returned to live at home. She got a job in Oslo as a cleaner at a hospital, and then later she got a job at the Uborg Brewery in Copenhagen in Denmark, then worked for a bit as an au pair in Strasbourg. After 5 years working, and then she came back to Oslo, and after 5 years working in Oslo, she moved and trained as an auxiliary nurse in Porsgrunn, a town about an hour away from her hometown of Krakow, and got a job at a hospital in the neighboring town of Skien. To her surprise, her coworkers actually liked her. She was a hard worker, quick, clever, quite funny. Then when she was 26, she got pregnant by a Swedish dude who then asked her to get an abortion, but she insisted on having the baby and would give birth to a daughter named Elizabeth in 1973. Dad won't stick around or help financially, and now she's a single mom. A couple years later, she made her first visit to her hometown since she'd left as a teen. When she returned, she found her mom to be seriously ill. According to case notes, she was suffering from powerful paranoid delusions and hallucinations. She needed help, but Venko had no interest in being the one to help her. after how she had been treated growing up, and she returned to Oslo. Back in Oslo, she and Elizabeth would now move around frequently, always trying to move to a nicer place, often moving to nicer districts within Oslo, even if Wenche couldn't necessarily afford it. Living well, even if it meant getting behind on rent and going into debt on credit cards, was her shield against the judgments of the outside world. She was always smartly dressed, had her hair done when she went out, favoring high-heeled shoes and fitted dresses over something more casual. She soon ended up in an apartment in a neighborhood called Frogner. One day in the basement laundry room, she met her upstairs neighbor, a newly divorced diplomat in the Norwegian Foreign Office, a pure white, back in his homeland after posts in London and Tehran. They made for an odd match. He was 43, gaunt, with thinning hair, not exactly a looker. She was 32, slim, pretty, and blonde, and they hit it off. At least they hit it off well enough to hook up frequently. And Jens would send Wenche a couple of love letters. Still, Wenche didn't see herself having a future with this man, not at first. There were things she liked about him. He could be kind and generous. He was tidy, took his job seriously. But he was also sulky. He wanted everything done his way, was incapable of taking other people's feelings into account. She told herself that she probably shouldn't get too involved with him in case she wanted to call things off, but then biology threw a wrench in that plan. Wenche got pregnant. Now the two got married at the Norwegian embassy in Bonn. He stayed for a week attending a conference while she stayed for just 2 days. Then she went back to Oslo to retrieve her daughter from the friend who was watching her. And at first, it seemed like things were going to go well in this marriage. Wenche could start to see herself in a lasting partnership with the man who, after all, she really didn't know that much about before she got together with him, or before she had the kid with him. But within a month or two, she became racked with doubts and no longer wanted the baby. Jens didn't seem like much of a father. When his 3 children from his previous marriage came to visit, he was distant and cold towards them. So now Wenche decides to get an abortion. A new law gave Norwegian women an unlimited right to abortions up to the 12th week of pregnancy. But Wenche waited too long to make up her mind, and now she has to have the baby. A baby she wants less and less as her pregnancy wears on. And just like her mother hated her before she was even born, blaming her for her polio, she grows to hate her unborn baby, blaming it for her unhappiness. As her morning sickness progresses, she begins to say things to friends like, it's as if he kicks me on purpose to torment me. Psychologist reports later state that she thought that Breivik was, before he was even born, a, quote, fundamentally nasty and evil child, determined to destroy her. Sounds like her mind was now working about as well as her mom's mind had been working. The baby, a boy, was due on February 4th, 1979, but he was 9 days overdue when Wenche delivered him at Aker Hospital, February 13th, 1979. Wenche was horrified when her baby came out with a distinct bluish tone to his skin. She thought something was wrong with him, maybe due to the pain meds she had taken during labor. And she would tell her friends later that the birth process was dreadful, that it was disgusting to have her husband there with her. Jens, on the other hand, thought he was a fine boy. But he hadn't prepared for the baby's arrival. There was no changing table, for example, at the apartment, and Wenche had to change his diapers on the bathroom floor. When their new baby was 6 months old, Jens Breivik was appointed a counselor at the Norwegian embassy in London. He went over first. Wenche followed with the kids around Christmas of 1979. Jens, Wenche, Elizabeth, and Anders. It's unclear if Jens' other children came as well. Lived in a flat now in Prince's Gate. A huge apartment, but Wenche hated it. While Elizabeth attended school, Wenche stayed home with her baby boy and an au pair, growing increasingly unhappy. Jens, for his part, felt like Wenche was using him, but she'd wanted a man with stability and a good job to provide for her. But she didn't actually love him. And then, making matters worse, by the spring of 1980, Wenche had fallen deep into a postpartum depression, and one day, she started packing her bags. But then, 3 days after she left, she told her husband she wanted to take the children home. Reluctantly, he agreed, and then she almost immediately left again, and she traveled to Oslo, where she quickly filed for divorce. And following her divorce, she now had 2 children to raise on her own. She didn't have any contact with her family, her mom, or her 2 older brothers. She still has 0 contact with Elizabeth's dad. Through a lawyer, Jens does agree to pay child support and allow Wenche, Elizabeth, and Anders to live in his flat in Fritzner's Gate for 2 years. But things are still tough financially, and Wenche takes her frustrations out on Anders, claiming he is a clingy, whiny child prone to violent moods. And at night, she starts to leave her children alone more and more frequently to take a night shift at work or to go out and party with friends. She continues to leave her kids unattended even after neighbors confront her. But then in May of 1981, when Anders is 2, she calls social services and asks if she can have a support worker for the kids. And in July, she applies for weekend care, kind of a part-time foster program, for both Anders and Elizabeth. In October of 81, weekend respite care is approved for Anders, and now he is handed off to a sort of part-time foster family for a weekend twice a month, 2 weekends a month, a newly married couple in their 20s. And this couple immediately comes to the conclusion that Venko is batshit crazy. Why? Well, for starters, she asked her son's new weekend dad if Anders could occasionally touch his dick. Yeah, you heard that right. She literally asked her son's new foster dad if it would be cool if he got to examine his cock and balls from time to time. Why? Because it was important for the boy's sexuality to develop with a role model. I mean, how would he possibly ever know what to do with his own dick if he didn't get a good gander at what his dick was going to look like when it became full grown? Venko said he had only seen girls' parts and didn't know how the male body worked. And apparently Venko had never heard of, a fucking anatomy book. The foster couple were floored, but too embarrassed to report her. Instead, they took Anders out to the forest and the countryside, to parks and playgrounds around the city. They thought he was a nice little boy, and they never even once let him look at or play with daddy's dingling or his fucking nutsack. And maybe that pissed Venko off, because one weekend Venko didn't turn up with Anders. She decided that their home was not a suitable home for her son. Mother difficult to please, keeps demanding more. Social Services Office recorded in May of 1982. Indeed, the month before that report, Venko had gone to the foster home section of the Child Welfare Office to look into the possibility of having both children fostered. Why? Well, because they were grinding her gears. She wanted them to, quote, go to the devil, she told the counselors. That's what she's saying to social services. Where do you want your kids to go? To the devil! Okay, well, we'll look into that. I'm not sure what we can do. That's what she was casually saying to the people working at the Child Welfare Office. Imagine what she is saying at home to them. And sorry if my mouth is a little more off than normal. I've got this stupid head cold right now where I have this, some kind of inflammation in the back of my throat that makes it feels like your ears are full. And it just makes, certain sounds a little trickier to make. Anyway, you probably didn't even notice, and now you probably will. I probably should have never said shit. When that fall and its high latitude darkness arrived, life got darker for Anders and his sister, both literally and figuratively. In October, Venko checked herself into the Frogner Medical Center. Mother seems severely depressed, they note, thinking of just walking out on the children and leaving them to society to live her own life. God, I can't imagine. I mean, I guess I'm lucky that I haven't dealt with serious mental illness that I'm aware of. Maybe I have. I don't know. But I just can't imagine saying that to my fucking kids, or even about my kids, to professionals. You know what? These fucking idiots, I'm sick of their shit. And I just want to go out and live my own life. I mean, sure, in brief fantasies over the years, I'm like, God, I just want to fucking live on an island by myself. In quick little moments, but not really. She's actually saying that to people. Venko and the children had now been living in Anders' father's flat in Fritzner's Gate for just over 2 years. The period she and Jens had agreed to was now over, and he wants his apartment back, and that's not helping her stress. As Christmas approaches, Venko hits rock bottom. She finds that she can't bring herself to control or discipline her kids, especially Anders, who probably didn't care anymore what his mom thought of him. He would hit her and his sister Elizabeth. If she told him off, he'd smirk. If she shook him, he would shout, "It doesn't hurt, it doesn't hurt." This is what she's saying, at least. Thankfully, thanks to Jens' membership at the Oslo Housing and Savings Society, Venko and her children get the opportunity to live in a new apartment building called Silk and Straw, designed specifically for families with young children. The new apartment had 5 bright, airy rooms, and outside there was a play area and a garden. But still, Venko didn't want her kids anymore. At the start of the new year, in 1983, Venko contacted the Family Counseling Service at the Oslo Health Board and asked for a new respite care placement for her son. She claimed she was having trouble doing practically anything with him, like dropping him off at daycare at Frogner Park, literally within walking distance from her flat, or fetching him in the afternoon. It was so hard to walk a few blocks and drop her son off for other people to take care of him for the day while she just went home and did not work. And it was nearly impossible to walk back later and pick him up. Come on, someone help her out. She said Anders ran off constantly. And he was at school. She got frequent calls from teachers expressing their concerns. He wasn't making friends. He wasn't crying. If he hurt himself, he mostly made up his own games. He played by himself and ignored the other kids. So he's off. Venko now wants her son to receive a psych eval. She wants to know, if this little inkling she'd had about her son not being right from the moment before he was even born was correct. So 2 weeks before Anders' 4th birthday, at the end of January 1983, the family is called in for an evaluation at the Center for Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. And it is quickly determined that Venko is the one who needs attention, like professional attention. Neighbors had noticed for years that she often spoke at them instead of to or with them, laughing at her own jokes, slurring her words, making body jokes, even in front of her own kids. When she arrives at the Center for Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, she is confused. She's on edge. The family is split up for observation, and specialists observe that Anders seems to take no joy in life, that he participates mechanically in activities and often looks very sad, that he is, weirdly tidy for a little guy, like, very kind of OCD. Everything has to be just so, worried about, making messes, worried about things not being proper and perfect. After a couple of days, though, he seems to get better. He relaxes. He accepts praise from staff. He seems proud of himself for learning some new skills. He's opening up, and psychologists determine that nothing's wrong with him. It's his home life that's causing his strange behavior. It's mom. Meanwhile, Venko's report states, quote, "This pure white lady is sure quite crazy." Or it said, quote, "She is threatened by chaotic conflicts and shows signs of illogical thought when under pressure. Mentally, she has a borderline personality disorder and functions very unevenly. Given a structured situation for living, she can function well, but she is vulnerable in a crisis." So she really doesn't handle stress well, and her life is pretty stressful. They noted that Venko's behavior towards Anders can change rapidly and without warning. One moment, she'll be pleasant and kind, only to start shouting aggressively at him in the next. And her rejections can be brutal. The staff at the center heard her yell at her 4-year-old son, quote, "I wish you were dead." And again, if she is saying that in front of a psychiatric staff, what the fuck is she saying to him at home? Families would usually be discharged from the center after a 4-week observation period. And at the end of the month, it was recommended that Anders should definitely be placed in foster care and taken away from his mom. Full time. As in, let's get this kid away from this lady as fast as fucking possible before she breaks him. And it seemed as if Venko was in agreement and ready to let him, go and live with another family. But then shit hits the fan once again. Anders' father, Jens Breivik, who is now stationed in Paris, he receives the report from the Center for Child and Adolescent Psychiatry about his son, and through his lawyer, he demands custody. And then Venko, who had welcomed the prospect of weekend respite care, now refuses point blank to accept any help at all, since it might give her ex-husband an advantage in court. So she's using her kid as a pawn, putting her ego in front of his needs. Now everything is in the hands of the Oslo City Court. There's nothing that social services can do for Anders except testify at trial. And in October of 1983, the court rules that Anders' situation does not require urgent action and that the boy can live with his mom until the father decides to sue for custody formally. But then Jen simply gives up. So what a shit show. He does not make any effort to get custody of his nearly 5-year-old son now. Still, a young psychologist does not want to give up on Anders. Arded Jertsen asks the child welfare authorities to take Anders into care, emphasizing that Anders' mental state can seriously and irreversibly deteriorate if he stays with mom. Then in November, Venko's lawyer accuses this psychologist of victimizing Venko. And there is nothing more that anybody can really do, especially when Frogner Park Nursery writes a report saying that Anders was a cheerful, happy boy, allegedly a report written by a friend of Venko's who worked there. And now Venko appears, at least to the outside world, to be getting her act together. 3 welfare checks will be carried out, 1 with notice, 2 unannounced in the winter of 1984. And the reports say that Venko appears organized, tidy, and in control. The report's only objection is that Venko had sent her kids out for pizza, and they were, quote, possibly a bit young to run that sort of errand, and one might add that pizza can scarcely be called a nutritious meal. Well, if that's true, there were so many meals I received growing up that were not nutritious. Around midsummer 1984 now, the Child Welfare Board reaches its unanimous verdict. It is not necessary to take Anders into care, and the case is now dismissed. The system had failed Anders. Around this time, a number of unsold flats at a housing development called Silk and Straw were bought up by the Oslo City Council and allocated to refugee families. Asylum seekers from Iran, Eritrea, Chile, Somalia, they moved into the flats around the blue, green, and red gardens, and gradually the scents of garlic, turmeric, allspice, and saffron drifted out through open balcony doors. This was a sharp departure from life before, which had been exceedingly white, pure white. And now there were like these other colors around. Pretty gross, off-white colors. Cannot imagine walking out my front door and seeing non-whites in real life. Not just on the news. My God, I just fucking shivered and got goosebumps. I suddenly don't feel safe. I feel queasy. I feel like I need to speak to the manager, but I'm not in a store. Everyone knows I'm being facetious, right? Facetious, such a good word. Probably describes my sense of humor better than any other single word. This new living situation really was a shock for the Breiviks. At the start of the 1970s, Norway had fewer than 1,000 non-Western immigrants in the entire nation. 1971 saw the first influx of foreign workers as the Norwegian state tackled a chronic labor shortage by issuing an invitation to Pakistan. 600 single men came over to work that year, taking jobs that most Norwegians did not want, living in cramped and uncomfortable parts of the city, and sometimes, and you might want to sit down before you hear this next part, in case you pass out. Sometimes these, how should I say this? These browns, they would date and even fuck pure white Norwegian women, a.k.a. snow pusses. That's what Norwegian women are sometimes called, right? Snow pusses? I'm pretty sure I've heard that somewhere and didn't just make that up to be ridiculous. Years later, when more refugees arrived, 1980, chased around more snow pusses. 4 years before the Breiviks lived in their midst. They weren't just single workers, but often families. People who brought over their own bicycles. People trying to set themselves and their kids up for better lives. One such family, pretty brown family, was Chilean. They lived below the Breiviks. Anders liked them, especially a little girl 2 years younger than him. Her name was Eva, and they became fast friends. And there goes the neighborhood! Anders, just 5 years old. He started waiting for his little non-white friend every day after school, especially after he left nursery school for Smysta, an altogether different environment of blue-blooded prep school boys and the occasional member of the royal family, a fancy little school. Perhaps to feel like he too was blue-blooded and superior, Anders became a bit of a bully here. He broke the heads off of neighbors' flowers, threw stones through open windows, as though to prove he was a rightful member of the upper class. He would bully kids who were smaller than him, especially refugees who did not speak Norwegian and had darker skin. One of his victims was a little boy from Eritrea. One time, Anders rolled the boy up in a rug, or Eritrea, there we go, and jumped on him over and over, which actually is pretty brutal. Could have killed that kid. Eva told him not to do this, but she was powerless to stop him. Adults couldn't do much either, since when the kids would get scolded, Anders would simply just creep away, head home, where his mom wouldn't discipline him because she was kind of checked out, and then he would just come back later when things had calmed down. 1987, the year Anders started at Smysta, the Labour Party returned to power. The Conservative Prime Minister, Karit Vilak, had failed to win the support of the right-wing Progress Party after voting to increase gas prices. And suddenly a woman named Gro Harlem Brundtland was prime minister again. She'd been prime minister before 1981, having been nominated to replace the retiring prime minister. As Norway's first woman to have the job, she had fought to remove barriers to advancement for working-class people and anyone marginalized like women and minorities. Gross. So she was fucking woke. And I hope she gets killed in this story now. No. Then when the general election came up in 1981, despite being a replacement, she would still have to run. And she found herself with fierce opponents who labeled her a shrew. Stickers started appearing in windows that said, "Kick her out." Became a popular Norwegian slogan. Kick her out! Kick out the shrew! That'll teach her. How dare a woman want to be a leader? Labour had failed to win the vote in 1981, but now she was back and better prepared. She became the first head of government in the world to form a cabinet with as many female ministers as male ones. And for some reason, the country didn't fucking fall into ruin. Incredible. 8 out of the 17 cabinet posts, plus herself at the top, were women. And somehow Norway survives this. Through her policies, Gro set out to make life more practical for families. Her government extended maternity leave, built nurseries, gave more rights to single parents. Boo! Work all the time or die, commies! The state feminism drew sharp criticism from many in Norway. The term vagina state was coined and tossed around a bunch. Nice! Oh, fuck yeah, bro. Totally. If women take a position of power, talk about their vaginas as much as possible. As if having a sexual innie instead of an outie makes them inferior, because it does. Misogyny. If you don't like it, you're woke, okay? And if you go woke, you go broke. And if you go broke, you stay woke and are a joke. I'm not exactly sure what all the woke rules are. All the woke talk I find very confusing in recent years. Anders was almost certainly exposed to this mindset at his school, and he tried to embody it, but not consistently. It took him a while to let go of any empathy and compassion of others and devolve into cowardly lynch mob hatefulness. For example, he did bully the only Pakistani kid in his class, a boy named Ahmed. But then one day Ahmed hit him back, and the two became best friends once they actually talked and got to know each other. Funny how that works. Now they ran around the forest, played basketball together, watched movies together. It was almost like once Anders took a second to see him as another human being and not as an other, he realized they had a lot in common. For Anders, this kind of push and pull will be a constant in his life. Feeling superior, which would mean alienating as many people under him as possible, or not being an intolerant dick and making friends. He keeps vacillating back and forth between these two things. For the time being, he chooses to have friends. Eventually, he will leave his mostly white, mostly upper-class school to attend a secondary school at the age of 13 in 1992. This new school, called Reese, was on the well-to-do west side of Oslo, and the students came from a variety of backgrounds. Anders didn't know any of them, and he was able to reinvent himself, and he will choose a new identity. In the early 90s, Oslo was full of graffiti, distinctive names painted in lurid colors, and Anders wanted to see his own art amongst the other art. To become a tagger, you needed a name, and ideally it would not be your own, since you would be more easily caught and fined. Anders picked a name. He chose a character from Marvel Comics. In one comic he had this, the universe is ruled by the all-powerful Galactus. Formerly a mortal man, Galactus is a cosmic entity who consumes planets to sustain his life force. He is introduced, created by former Suck subject Stan Lee, actually, along with Jack Kirby, as a godlike figure that fed by draining living planets of their energy, and is a being who operated without regard to the morality or judgments of mortal beings. Anders will later operate without regard to the morality of judgment of mortal beings himself. One of Galactus's henchmen was a man who had betrayed his own race by executing his own people, and that got Galactus's attention and respect. That character's name was Morg, and Anders picks the name of Morg for his tagger name. So a little bit of foreshadowing. Clearly, he is already struggling with his feelings toward immigrants and feelings towards, his own people and how they are accepting immigrants. Anders fit in with some other amateur taggers. One boy called himself Wick, another Spock. Then there was Ahmed, his old buddy from elementary school. Anders loved tagging. He liked how it differentiated him from the preppy kids at his high school. Most of whom were aiming to become like doctors, lawyers, executives. Also gained him those same kids' respect to be known as a troublemaker. That's right. So he has friends and he's feeling superior, the perfect combo for Anders. Within the greater world of graffiti artists, however, Anders is still a toy, aka a novice. The artists at the top are called kings, and they tagged in the riskiest places in the center of town where you could easily be arrested if you weren't careful. As a toy, Anders mainly helped, more established graffiti artists. He would work as a lookout for them. After getting arrested a few times, not snitching, he started getting some more clout, and people started to know him for his tags. He practiced constantly, got pretty good, but the higher-ups in his tagging group still did not feel like he was worthy of being a king. Morg, they said, even though he hadn't yet graduated to become a king, was acting like it, though. And now some of them started to make fun of him. And soon, none of his old group of taggers would hang out with him anymore. Spock and Wick, they bail on him. Ahmed has no clout. And now Anders is once again almost alone. He got too arrogant, and it cost him most of his friends. But he didn't let that get him down. He doubled down on acting like a king by tagging over some local king's graffiti. And now this makes Anders a target of relentless bullying by both taggers and non-taggers alike. His favorite phrases are mocked, caricatures appear on his face, exaggerating his nose. Now he's a scourge of the community he had gotten his first taste of having a little bit of clout in. And in response, Anders starts lifting weights religiously, twice a day most days, and still tags relentlessly. But then after getting arrested, when he came back home from Denmark, where he had visited his dad, where paint was sold cheaply, his father officially cuts ties with him, which seems a bit extreme. Wonder if there was more to it, or if his dad really was like, that's it! If my son refuses to stop spray painting on the property of others, I guess I don't have a fucking son! Whatever happened, Anders was arrested again shortly thereafter for tagging a bridge at Storo in the north of Oslo, and has to pay 3,000 kroner, and that pushes him out of tagging and into a different kind of art. He starts attending Harvig Nielsen, an upper secondary school specializing in drama. He's elected class representative, but still feels like he's a misfit and leaves after a year. He next attends, Oslo Commerce School, where he changes his look to slim-fit Levi's and polo shirts, starts acting preppy. Outside of school around this time, he gets a part-time job as a telephone salesman for Telia, which he pushes everything from hunting, fishing, and music magazines to scratch cards, something called wine calendars, and crime fiction. He proves to have a flair for sales, but soon is working mainly on the customer service side of things because he handles complaints so well. So he's doing well in this job. He also starts buying stocks on Norway's stock market, the Oslo Stock Exchange. And one day he makes 200,000 kroner in one transaction. It inspires him to carry on trading in shares, and he starts taking an increasing number of days off of school to do this. Soon he is hardly attending classes, and just before Christmas is in his final year, he sends a letter to his school informing them he's done. Mom is pissed. Why would he leave 6 months before his final exams? Well, Anders tells her the school is slowing him down, holding him back. He's making so much fucking money. He quits his job in telephone sales, sets up his own business. Before quitting, however, he took a database of foreigners in Norway from work, people he called priority A customers, the heavyweights. He now had starting capital of 100,000 kroner for his new company, Behring and Kerner Marketing, and he's going to run this company with a friend. And that 100,000 kroner translates to about 9,000 US dollars, by the way, so it's not actually that much money. This new business of his is pretty much the same business as telephone sales he was working in before. And since nobody trusts two teenagers, the venture goes under in about a year. And now Anders has to go back to his old job, which was probably not good for his ego. Slowly, he starts saving money for a new business. He wants to set up databases of rich people, potential investors, then sell those databases to interested parties. But he can't figure out how to come up with all the info on the rich people he needs. So he tables that, decides he's going to go into advertising. Goes into business with a kid named Christian that he knew from his neighborhood, another pure white, and he rents a small office with a law firm, or from a law firm. The advertising business does not take off, though, and Anders has to sell it to a billboard company for the same amount he had put into it, so at least he breaks even. Then Christian goes to work for that billboard company, and now Anders works on his next idea. Advertising placards could be mobile. Then you wouldn't have to pay anything for the site because the street is free. So he plans to hire unemployed academics to cycle around the city with placards fixed to a trailer. He makes a prototype in the basement at home, negotiates a contract with Plata Compagniet, this chain of music and DVD stores in Norway. I'm butchering their name, I'm sure. The contraption was sent out on its rounds, but the construction was not solid enough, and the placard blows over on the very first day, injuring a woman, and the business folds. I love that. I have a great idea. I want to make this big, heavy, sharp-edged sign and tape it to this cart that you're going to fucking drive around town, and it's going to be fantastic. Okay, but what if it flies off? Couldn't it hit and really hurt someone? I doubt it. Let's worry about that if and when it becomes a problem. And then day one. Shit, her head is pretty dented and fucked up. It has become a problem. Now broken with no degree. Zero good ideas, but wanting immense recognition for his minimal talent. What does Anders turn to next? Politics. Oh, fuck yeah. Those who can't do want to be put in charge of telling others what they can do. And I know not all politicians are shit, but some of them are. Anders now joined Norway's Conservative Party, the Progress Party, at age 18 in 1997. Let's learn a little bit about this party. The Progress Party was founded in 1973 by Anders Lang, a forestry technician who was critical of the welfare state. The party was originally named Anders Lang's Party for a Strong Reduction in Taxes, Duties, and Public Intervention. But then someone was like, holy fuck, that's a dumb name for a political party. It was way too long. Not easy to repeat at all. One focus of this party was reducing the amount of welfare available to mothers. What a great thing to have as your focus. It says a lot about them. They sound super cool. So sick of all these moms getting help for their babies. Fuck these babies and fuck these moms. Someone's got to put a stop to this shit. Anders, the other Anders who started this party, said, quote, no one who has a good time with her husband in bed deserves financial help as a result. But what about the sperm donor in that situation? Those Melvins never seem to look in that direction. This guy was succeeded as party chairman by Carl Ivar Hagen, who changed the name to the Progress Party, a lot better name, also established the party's youth organization, Progress Party Youth. But his criticism of the government spending became unpopular, as most people could see declines in infrastructure, schools, social services, long lines at the hospitals, things that, tax money would be needed to fix. And for a long time, this party was not very popular at all. But then in 1987, the party changes its focus to immigration. That year, Hagen got a letter, quote unquote, from a Kurdish man named Mohammed Mustafa. The letter was dated July 8th, 1987, and read as follows. To Carl Hagen, from Muhammad Mustafa. Allah is Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. You struggle in vain, Mr. Hagen. Islam, the only true faith, will gain victory here in Norway. One day mosques will become as common in Norway as churches are today, and my great-grandchildren will experience this. I know, and all Muslims in Norway know, that the population of Norway will come to the faith and that this country will be Muslim. We give birth to more children than you, and several true believing Muslims arrive in Norway every year, men in productive age. One day the infidel cross and the flag shall go away. Now, this was, of course, deeply unnerving to many, and a very stupid letter for Mustafa to send, right? We're taking over, motherfuckers, try and stop us, if he sent it, but he didn't. This was bullshit. The tabloid newspaper Verdensgang soon claimed that they could prove that this letter was false, and they did. The letter was signed with a full name and address. The newspaper, they were able to contact Muhammad Mustafa to investigate this. He denied having sent the letter and also pointed out that he didn't live in the address mentioned in the letter for like well over a year. It wasn't his handwriting. There was all kind of problems. Regardless, the letter, works regarding its intended purpose. It sells, a lot of fear and paranoia in Norway. The Progress Party almost doubles its share of votes for 1987's local elections, gaining 12% of the vote. In the big cities where immigration was highest, the party polls between 15 and 20% higher. A decade later, 1996, the year before Breivik joins the Progress Party, it had turned its rhetoric against immigrants in the direction of critique of Islam more broadly. In Hagen's view, Muslim refugees had taken no decisive steps towards integration and instead had turned towards fundamentalism. For his part, perhaps because of his of the friends he'd had as a kid, young Anders more cautious about his critiques of Islam. On Progress Party youth forums, he wrote something very intelligent and fair, actually. He wrote, "It's important to make the point that Islam is a great religion on a level with Christianity and that Muslims are generally good people on a level with Christians." He stressed that it was certain aspects of negative cultures related to Islam that should be criticized, not Islam itself. Now let's jump 5 years ahead in the timeline to 2002 when Anders is 23. 2003 will be an election year. And by the summer of 2002, Anders and his new friend/girlfriend, Leen Langemyr, Norwegian girl who'd been adopted as a baby from New Delhi, India, so a non-white brown, were excitedly attended meetings. Anders, in particular, wanted to be on the list for city council elections the following year. First, local branches would submit suggestions to the nomination committee. Then the candidates under consideration would be called in for an interview by this committee. Jurin Kalmyr, Anders' colleague and the leader for the Progress Party youth, gets a call for an interview. So does Leen, his girlfriend, but Anders, pure white, not brown, does not. What is happening? Throughout the fall, he waits as he assumes the party searches through his backlog of nominations. Perhaps it is still coming. Just before Christmas 2002, the final nomination list comes out. Anders still not on it. Jurin gets voted onto the council. Leen is elected as a substitute member. Soon, Jurin will be bumped up to become secretary to a local government commissioner, and Leen will be made a regular member, and Anders is still on the outside, nothing. Now he begins to become more extreme. Possibly to get noticed and approved of, possibly just because he's fucking angry and bitter. He's spouting the kind of harsh rhetoric now that he previously disavowed. In one of his last posts in the summer of 2003, Anders predicts civil war once the Muslims are in the majority in Norway. The Islamization of the West is alarming, he says. He also decides that politics, not for him. He's going to go back into the private sector with an even more insane idea. It had struck him a year or so earlier, possibly due to his own lack of a degree, that there was a market for fake diplomas. And in autumn of 2002, he sets up a website called diplomaservices.com. So a bullshit diploma mill, a blatant scam, a grift. He starts heading down a dark path. He also opens the websites bestfakediploma.com and superfakedegree.com. And through these sites, you could get a bachelor's, a master's, even a doctorate diploma in the field of your choice. Quote, receive a high-quality fake diploma within 10 days, says the headline in bold italics. The cost is around $100 US per diploma with a complete package with an exam certificate plus diploma available for $295. Anders will pass on the request to a forger in Indonesia, who he pays a monthly salary of $700 US a month. And as insane as this might sound, this idea makes money. Hundreds of thousands of dollars pour into accounts in tax havens like Antigua and Barbuda, St. Vincent and the Bahamas, where Anders will not have to pay taxes on this money. He receives anonymous credit cards that let him make withdrawals in Oslo without detection. To cover his bases, the company says that their diplomas are only to be used as props or replacements for lost diplomas, but of course that was not why people were shelling out hundreds of bucks for them. These things look very real. They wanted to scam people. With the new money he's making, Anders moves into a flat. His mom will come over to clean and do his laundry, for which Anders will pay her a couple thousand kroner a month. How good did that make him feel? Right? Mommy dearest, now working for him and doing basic labor at that. He must have loved it. He's the big man now. Because his Indonesian employee doesn't speak excellent English or Norwegian, he hires a Norwegian named Mads Madsen, Mads Madsen, to perform customer service for his company, which he now names E-Commerce Group. But then in the summer of 2004, Anders, Norwegian employee Mads resigns. Soon after, Mads is contacted by a reporter looking for info on fake diploma mills operated in Norway. Apparently, Anders' company was registered in Mads' name. Mads denies having anything to do with this company, but the story makes its way to the Norwegian government, and the Justice Department asks the Director of Public Prosecution to assess E-Commerce Group's legal status. The day after the article ran is the day of the general election. It was a good one for the Progress Party. They won 22% of the vote. But the Labour Party did better and entered into negotiations to form a coalition with the Socialist Left and the Centre Party. Together, the parties advocate a platform of putting the brakes on privatization, putting stricter regulations on market forces, bigger fines for financial misdemeanors, and higher taxes on share profits. Anders is furious about all this and hires an accountant to protect himself. Over the course of 2005, his family life, never satisfying, becomes even lonelier. His half-sister Elizabeth, she gets married, moves to Los Angeles, California. She's out in Hollywood now, working on showbiz. His non-white girlfriend has left him. He's fucking alone. He plans to spend Christmas of 2005 with his mom, just the two of them. But a few days before, Venko had run into her second cousin, Jan, who had invited her to his house for Christmas. And at Jan's house, Anders makes an amazing discovery. Jan is a Freemason. After a lot of begging, Jan finally agrees to introduce Anders to the chairman master of the Pillars for an interview. And that winter, Anders is shown around the Freemasons' headquarters. A magnificent high-roofed hall with murals on the ceiling, suits of armor and banners lining the corridors. Pretty badass. He loves it. And he thinks, oh man, if I can become a Mason, I will be so superior. After Anders has his Freemason interview, he is told that it's a complicated process and that he would hear back from them at some point down the road. And he doesn't leave with a good feeling about this. Seems like a repeat of the whole election nomination process where he just, gets left on the outside. In February 2006, he stops his diploma business, worried that he's going to be prosecuted. He buys some stock shares, but then the stock market falls for most of the spring. Then in May, share prices plummet. His cash reserves dwindle. Most of his money is tied up in shares. Now he can't sell those shares without taking a tremendous loss. And so Anders decides now to move back home at the age of 27 to live with mom in the summer of 2006. Not feeling very superior. He's no longer hiring mom to clean his undies. He's living at her place. And he has not heard back still about joining the Freemasons. So now, instead of trying to build himself back up again, instead of looking inwards and thinking, how can I improve? What can I do to put myself in a better position to get what I want going forward? He chooses to blame others, to look outward, to wallow in the attitude of life is so unfair, what's the point of even trying? And he withdraws from the world. He gives up on reality almost entirely, exchanging it for the world of fantasy gaming and World of Warcraft, which I get. I had to force myself to stop playing Warcraft in my early 20s. Had to throw away the game because it was feeling more fun than real life, and I was starting to withdraw from real life and lose myself in it. Why is it so fun? I've never really worried about getting addicted to drugs, but I still worry about getting addicted to gaming. I have to be so careful. Its pull on me is so strong. There's no equivalent for it with anything else. For some reason, I very much struggle with certain games when it comes to moderation. Everything about World of Warcraft made sense to Anders. Instead of the inherent equality or inequality of the real world, everyone started at the same place in the game. You could be exactly who you wanted to be: a priest, a warrior, a shaman, a paladin, a rogue, a druid, a hunter, a warlock, or a mage. You could choose your profession. You could be a blacksmith, alchemist, tailor, engineer, and more. Then instead of struggling to get ahead, meeting successes and setbacks, your skills in the game propelled you up through various levels if you put in the time and had, some basic gaming skills. Anders gave himself the name Anders Nordic. His race was human. His class was mage. His character was very tall, powerful, with a menacing grayish face. He moved up the levels swiftly, arranging raids with his guild, coordinating with other players who took the place of friends in real life. Part of the game's design, is to make you spend a lot of hours playing it, since logging off can set other people whom you're collaborating with back, and this is exactly what will happen with Anders. He'll end up spending the fall of 2006 playing 16 to 17 hours a day. Becomes a leader of the Virtue Guild, leading players who played for an average of 12 hours a day. And I bet they had a lot of fun. I had to get rid of Warcraft when I was starting off in stand-up in my early 20s because I became so addicted, I would skip meals to play this shit. And then I started skipping even taking a shower. And then my ex-wife came home one day when we were first married. That's probably 23, maybe 24. She comes home, and finds me only wearing pants, no underwear, no shirt. Hadn't even combed my hair or brushed my teeth by 6 p.m. Nope, just played the game all day long. Then quickly threw on pants when I heard her come up the stairs. Almost told her she had nearly caught me beaten off because that seemed less pathetic than the truth. And around this time, I would pretend to go to sleep at night in bed. And then when she was asleep, I would sneak up and play for hours in the middle of the night. My God, these games can ruin you. Jumping ahead a few months now. One February morning in 2007, an unexpected letter shows up for Anders. He had gotten in. He had actually been admitted to the Masons. He had been admitted to the first degree of the St. John Lodge, invited to his first meeting at the Freemasons headquarters. Jan, his relative, is going to be a sponsor. He's fucking in. His mom is so proud of him. Finally, her son's going to be doing something other than just sitting at the computer, not even beaten off. The day after his 28th birthday, Anders heads over to the Freemasons Lodge. And after an extensive ceremony, he is officially a brother of the first degree, and he doesn't give a shit. He just wants to go back home and play more Warcraft. He's now supposed to attend meetings every Wednesday, but he'll only attend one meeting. And then he'll just give up. The Freemason dream no longer matters to him. It's not as cool as being this fucking mage or whatever he is. All he wants to do is kick ass within the world of Warcraft, a world he much prefers now to this one. But soon he starts to have problems in this new world. Just like he had done with tagging years earlier, after getting a little bit of recognition, Anders gets real cocky and becomes real unlikable. He becomes so determined to be among the best players in the game that he alienates many of his guild members. So many, he ends up losing the group entirely. Then when he joins another server called Silver Moon, everyone there, they don't like him. They laugh at how cocky it is. They start talking shit about him. Now he feels like he's never going to make it to become one of the top 500 players in the world, which was a ranking he really coveted, and his love of Warcraft now starts to die. Making matters worse, not much else is working out for him either. Of course not. All he's doing is playing this fucking game. Right? By 2008, his e-commerce group, which he had, stopped paying attention to back in 2006, well, now it completely folds. According to the bankruptcy filing, the company had broken tax laws, share trading laws, accounting laws. His savings has dwindled to almost nothing. All he has is a bedroom at his mom's apartment, a room he calls the fart room. Life is bleak. He's not dating. He has no job, no friends, no money, living in a fart room at mom's apartment, a mom who never wanted him. With his World of Warcraft hobby on the fritz and his Freemason dream over, Anders turns back to something that had captured his attention a few years before, the Islamization of Europe. Right? He wants somebody to blame other than himself for his frustrations with life. Anders now believes that immigration from Arab countries, plus higher birth rates of Arabs in Europe, will lead to Europe being dominated and ruined by Muslim culture, and he has to stop this. On his computer, he starts devoting hours to his new favorite subject, especially on a forum called Gates of Vienna. Also on another forum, a neo-Nazi one called Stormfront, that called itself the voice of a new white minority that was ready to fight under the motto White Pride Worldwide. We examined Stormfront at length in Suck 396, One Man Race War, Joseph Paul Franklin, if you're curious. Jihad Watch was another favorite site of Anders. And all of these super shitty, poisonous sites share the same basic rhetoric. There was a white us, and there was a brown them. Us good, them bad. Real basic, real binary, real hateful. And the first place for losers who refuse to take personal accountability for their shortcomings, to bitch and blame and cheer each other on. Anders began to follow the most influential posters, including a writer named Fjordman, who frequently spouted dark passages about Muslim men raping Scandinavian women, cases that weren't even real, and how immigration had to be stopped lest the white race be exterminated entirely. And then Anders will take Fjordman's thinking a step further. Fjordman never advocated for outright deportation, but Anders said it was the only way, since high birth rates meant that the Islamic population would continue to grow even if immigration stopped. It wasn't enough to stop letting in new Muslims. The ones already in Norway had to fucking go. On February 13th, 2009, 3 acquaintances of Anders come to his door, his mom's door, technically, try to get him to come out for his birthday. He's turning 30 years old, and he refuses to join them. Instead, he chooses to spend his 30th birthday online, on these hate forums, especially on a news site he discovered called document.to, a Norwegian website that was deeply critical of Islam. And then a week before Norway's general election, due to be held September 14th, 2009, the username Anders B posts his first comment on document.to. Document.no. No, not to. It was about why the media ignored some Muslim rights. Anders wrote that there was, quote, an increasing trend in Western Europe towards an acceptance of the media hushing things up. He used some unrest in French towns around Bastille Day, July 4th, as an example. Le Monde and other French newspapers had refused to write about the riots, he claimed. But the quotes he used were part of a different story, namely that it was the French local authorities who had refused to answer questions from Le Monde, citing official instructions. Right? The Illuminati's behind this. His post got Anders the reaction he wanted. Responses poured in. And then Anders wrote new tracks about the, quote, killing of whites in South Africa and multiculturalism as a fundamentally anti-European ideology. A week after Anders' debut on document.no on Election Day morning, Anders wrote on the forum suggesting they start their own newspaper. He said that they might be able to eventually consolidate their movement with the Progress Party and usher in a new anti-immigration, pro-Norwegian era. He spent that day organizing the logistics, promising to get anyone who wanted to work with the newspaper in touch with investors. He drew up a business plan, hoping that the Progress Party would be victorious. They would not be. Instead, there would be 4 more years of the Labour Party in control. Anders is crushed. But this makes him think that a newspaper preaching the ideals he believed in was now essential, more important than ever. So he sent an email to the General Secretary of the Progress Party about it, and in January of 2010, the party responds. The Progress Party wished him the best of luck, but they didn't want shit to do with this fucking loser. Oh well. In the meantime, Anders had finished a, quote, book based on his, quote, research, which he, quote, published under the name Anders Breivik. And by book, I mean pamphlet. And by research, I mean none. And by published, I mean he posted it online. It began like this. Most Europeans look back at the 1950s as a good time. Our homes were safe, to the point where many people did not bother to lock their doors. Public schools were generally excellent, and their problems were things like talking in class and running in the halls. Most men treated women like ladies, and most ladies devoted their time and effort to making good homes, rearing their children well, and helping their communities through volunteer work. Children grew up in 2-parent households, and the mother was there to meet the child when he came home from school. Sounds like this little guy has some mommy issues, which, why wouldn't he? And wishes this was his childhood, which I get. But let me burst this bubble right now. Domestic violence, socially acceptable in most of the world in the 1950s, and for the most part, actually legal to a certain extent, sometimes to a great extent. Dudes, and in many countries, only white dudes, straight white dudes, they had it better in the 1950s, no one else. Marital rape was not illegal, and anecdotally, very common. Women got verbally and psychologically abused continually, beat often, kids got beat often, boys encouraged to essentially not have emotions, minorities continually disenfranchised, often legally, homosexuals could and did go to prison for being who they are. I could go on and on. Good old days were never that good for most people. It's a fucking bullshit fantasy, touted as truth for the most part by people like Anders Breivik. Breivik wanted to recapture the values that he thought existed in the 1950s. Well, actually, he wanted the exact values of the 1950s because it would have been great for him. The 1950s, when he said women were housewives and not soldiers, kids were not born outside of wedlock, and homosexuality wasn't a thing. Feminism, he said, went hand in hand with cultural Marxism. Spoken like a true incel. He wrote, "It is in television, where nearly every major offering has a female power figure, and the plots and characters emphasize inferiority of the male and superiority of the female. It is in the military, where expanding opportunity for women, even in combat positions, has been accompanied by double standards and then lowering of the standards, as well as a decline in enlistment of young men, while warriors in the service are leaving in droves. It is in government-mandated employment preferences and practices that benefit women and use sexual harassment charges to keep men in line. It is in public schools, where self-awareness and self-esteem are increasingly promoted while academic learning declines. And sadly, we see that several European countries allow and fund free distribution of contraceptive pills, combined with liberal abortion policies. Oh, how dare contraception pills be given out? Does that sound like the kind of shit a lot of people are saying in the world right now? Sure does to me. Anders wrote about how if women couldn't be counted on to make good little white babies, well, Muslims would rule Europe, so white women needed to be forced to be breeders. Might makes right. Time to rape and pillage for the glory of Rome. For Hitler's Germany. Anders Norway. The second section of the book was supposedly devoted to Islam, but it was really just mostly devoted to publishing essays that were actually written by Fjordman, that influential poster on Jihad Watch that Anders simply just plagiarized. Anders made even more outlandish claims than Fjordman, though, like how the actual number of Muslims in Europe was being kept a secret by authorities. Then he turned to the Quran to prove that Muslim domination has been a plan from the beginning. But on this kind of thing, I will say, doesn't every Western religion, no, that's not even true. Don't Christianity and Islam want to dominate the world? Come on, let's be honest. The repentance verse of the Quran was part of his proof, he said. Kill the polytheists wherever you find them, arrest them, imprison them, besiege them, and lie in wait for them at every side of ambush. Actually, that verse refers to sects that worshipped multiple gods in old Arabia, not Jews and Christians. But if you needed more proof than this misattributed line, well, Anders himself had been a friend of the Muslim gangs, he said. He had seen it firsthand, he claimed, which he hadn't. He falsely claimed that through his friend Ahmed, that little Pakistani boy he knew in middle school, he had been introduced to 2 Muslim gangs who beat up ethnic Norwegian youngsters who lacked the right connections. To avoid being their target, Anders said he entered into an alliance with them, and because they could be relied on to back him if he needed it. Norwegians, he said, would sissy out when it came to conflict, so he wanted Muslim allies. None of this is true. He claimed to have heard during this time that Ahmed was involved in a gang rape of a bunch of white girls, and Anders apparently did nothing, just kept being best friends with him. Okay, weird. He said eventually he got knocked down by a huge Pakistani guy who had been ordered to attack Anders by Ahmed, and they had not been friends since. He said it was after that he got involved with the tagging community, but then the tagging community was hijacked by Marxist jihadi youth, and Anders was like, fuck that, no thank you, and he left with his head held high. After that, he said he got involved with the Progress Party, but realized they were a bunch of fucking pussies who could not change the system by democratic means. And that led to his last section, his most violent, called The Phase for Dialogue is Over. He made a thorough list of the types of people who could be considered traitors to the white race in Europe as a whole. Journalists, editors, teachers, professors, university leaders, publishers, radio commentators, writers, comic strip creators, artists, technical experts, scientists, doctors, and church leaders. So smart people. So fucking typical. All those creative and educated people who think deeply about how to improve the world for everyone and strangely come to very similar conclusions. The people who denounce people like myself as simple-minded bigots and losers, they are the problem. They need to fucking die. Anders said that they had all been complicit in betraying their people, their race, cultural genocide, and they needed to be punished for being race traitors. Fuck Team Meat Sack. There should only be Team White. Team Pure White and their strong Aryan knights and super hot snow pusses. Most serious traitors, Class A traitors, Anders wrote, were leaders of political parties, trade unions, cultural institutions, and the media, and they would be sentenced to death. Class B traitors were less important cultural Marxists. They would also be sentenced to death, but could in some instances have that punishment reduced to like life in prison. C traitors, well, they wielded little influence themselves, but aided and abetted traitors in the 2 higher categories, and they would receive either fines or prison sentences or both. A lot of dark shit. But to be fair, he did include some good news. He said that all multiculturalists will be pardoned if they capitulated to the Knights Templar before January 1st, 2020. Okay, interesting. Bring the Knights Templar back for some reason. Not sure why they're needed here. But I guess he liked their history and how cool their armor looked. Probably thinking about paladins from World of Warcraft. January 1st, 2020 was also the date on which the mass deportation of Muslims would begin under his plan. To avoid expatriation, Muslims would have to convert to Christianity and be baptized with a new Christian forename, middle name, and surname. They would also be forbidden from speaking any traditional Middle Eastern or African language. All mosques will be demolished. All traces of Islamic culture in Europe will be eradicated, even places of historical interest. Still not done. No ex-Muslim couple will be permitted to have more than 2 kids. And there will be a strict ban on telephoning, emailing, or exchanging letters between Muslim friends and families. Also, for 2 full generations, former Norwegian Muslims will not be able to travel back to their homelands. But despite this rhetoric, Anders said he didn't actually blame Muslims for what was happening in Norway. He blamed the people who had allowed them to enter, the Labour Party, and their shitty supporters. The first phase of fighting those people before they could get to the executions and imprisonments would be to wage a ceaseless campaign of violence against cultural Marxists that will last all the way until 2030. Not sure why he thought it would take that long to get rid of them. If he was starting to do all this shit in 2020, really before 2020, like well before, why would he need, more than 10 years to punish the white academics? Norway only had about 5 million people at this time, total. Seems like he could have figured out who needed killing a little quicker. But I guess he wanted, time to be thorough. Anders proposed doing shit like deploying a bomb at a journalist annual conference, shooting people who fled afterwards, setting off a car bomb at a parade, disguising himself as a fireman, hurling grenades, using a flamethrower in the auditorium at the Labour Party National Congress or at the House of the People. Or he could park a car packed with explosives outside, time to go off just as delegates swarmed out to escape flames. He wrote that those who survived would be literally branded, serving as living reminders of what would happen to race traitors. He also wrote that seeming non-threatening was the key to all of these plans. Be a chameleon, put on a disguise, he wrote, suggesting his readers acquire a police uniform so that they can move around easily with weapons. And again, this would all take place until 2030. Then, this is a long plan. For the next 40 years, from 2030 to 2070, more advanced resistance fronts would emerge and begin to coup governments all across Europe. Fucking dominoes falling. Right, this is going to be happening for a long time. Still not done. In the next phase, post-2070, traitors will be executed and the new all-white Europe, or at least all non-Muslim and barely any brown Europe, not even much cream or beige, will emerge with peace reigning from 2083 on under the leadership of the return of the Knights Templar. Of course, Anders will have the highest rank in this revival. I don't know how the fuck he thinks he's still going to be alive at this point. But he is going to be Justitius. This guy's an idiot. He gave himself the rank of Justitius, Knight Commander. Oh, man. A lot of World of Warcraft showing up in this plan. Honors will be awarded in 2083 when he will be 100. When was he born? Like 1980? Or I can't remember, but right around 1980, just off the top of my head. I'm deviating from my notes right now. But if he's going to be having these honors awarded in 2083, he's a little over 100 years old. I'm not sure how he thinks this is going to work out. But anyway, honors will be awarded in 2083, depending on how many traitors one had killed. These honors had titles like Distinguished Destroyer of Cultural Marxism and Distinguished Saboteur Master. There was an award for intellectual excellence. Very cool. Planning for all this, he warned, would isolate you from friends and family. They would think you're weird, or that you're hiding something, or that you're ashamed about yourself. But that was okay, even desired, he said. He wrote how he himself had a number of friends who thought he was gay. I don't think he has a number of friends. But anyway, but any friends he does have apparently thought he was gay. And he thought that was hilarious because he was, quote, most definitely 100% hetero. Totally. Every guy I know who is hetero always makes a point to say they are, quote, definitely 100% hetero. I say that myself a lot. I say stuff like, I can't even count how many times I've said stuff like, hey guys, do you care if my wife's coming along? Because I have a wife, and she is a woman with a vagina that I think is very cool. One that I enjoy both the taste and touch of and smell most of the time. I have sex with my wife's vagina a lot. And I very much enjoy it because I am definitely 100% hetero. Oh yeah, talking like that will never ever lead to anyone questioning your sexuality and thinking that you're deeply in the closet and mentally unwell and not happy about everything. Anyway, Anders wrote about how if you survive being a social outcast and the violent missions, you had the ultimate reward to look forward to, a new utopia. And who doesn't want a new utopia? Better than the old utopia. When the Civil War was over, Anders claimed the ideal society would be constructed to protect European genes. Factories of surrogate white, pure white, snowpuss mothers would be set up in low-cost countries. This is so fucking disturbing. And each mother would be expected to produce 10 or so blonde, blue-eyed children. Glory be to Gilead! Under his eye! Like they used to, back in the good old days. Before all the snowpusses got all uppity, wanted rights, choices, body autonomy. Anders wrote that parents who were not suitable to look after their children could place them with patriotic foster parents who would be allowed to have up to 12 kids. This new society would also be chaste, with sexual abstinence before marriage becoming the norm. Divorce would be penalized. Fathers, not mothers, Not fucking crazy bitches like mommy. Will be given custody of their kids when parents split up. Anders said this new utopia, which I gotta say doesn't sound very fun, was inspired directly by his childhood, which had been ruined by the forces of feminism. All of this was, of course, the product of a very disturbed mind. By someone very likely mentally ill, just like mom and grandma. Others around Anders were starting to notice that he was disturbed around the time he's writing all this. Even mommy, Venko. She spent several years hoping her son would get it together, stop spending so much time on his computer. By 2010, she was extremely worried about him. And if she's worried about you, you're very fucked up. Venko said her son now had wild mood swings, accused her of talking to people who could infect them both. When he was like that, she said he would barely come out of his room. When he did come out, he would put his hands over his face, to use the bathroom or wear a face mask. So, he wouldn't get infected. He's not well. He's also acting weird in other ways. When she broke up with her boyfriend, Anders bought his mom a vibrator. She said that he was taking things, quote, a bit far with that. And then, taking it further, baby boy kept asking her, in all seriousness, if she had tried out his present. What the fuck is happening here? That is messed up. And I also kind of want to do it to my mom now. But just to make everyone in the family uncomfortable, as a joke. To be clear, I would do that knowing it was messed up. But actually, even then, it's still too messed up, probably. You know what? Actually, when I really think about it, I don't want to do that. If my mom... If I gave my mom a vibrator and then she described how good it made her feel, how much fun it was to have it, I might just try and drown myself. So I'd never have to think about that again. Venko. But also I would think it's kind of funny because I'm disturbed. Venko, while she now knew her son was messed up, she still didn't know how far gone her son was. He was starting to actually build a bomb. The year before, in May of 2009, he had set up a one-man business called Breivik Geo Farm that was actually not a business, just a pretend business that operated from his mom's apartment. He had registered the company with the Norwegian Register of Business Enterprises, giving its objectives as, quote, buying, selling, and management of shares, project development, including acquisition and development of real estate. Then he started looking for farm space, somewhere to stash all the stuff he's buying. First thing he bought was a Pelican case from America, one of those highly durable, waterproof, crush-proof protective cases. Then he ordered smoke grenades, laser gun sights, spike strips to shred tires, flashing blue lights, GPS navigators, silencers, gun magazines. He bought himself a military suit, decorated it with a gold brocade, using a needle and thread. Bought army boots, a helmet with a visor, body armor, like bulletproof vest, Soviet gas mask, some plastic handcuffs. Then he found a base of operations. He got in touch with a man who owned a farm called Vol. Established way back in 1750, the farm consisted of a white painted house, a barn, summer cow shed, farmhands' quarters, red storehouse raised on pillars, plus a garage. It lay on the eastern side of the Glomma River, looked out over dense forest to the east, while the view to the west was of green pasture and fields. The owner was about to go to prison for having run what sources describe as a hash plantation and wanted to rent the place out before he began his sentence. Anders told him he was going to start sugar beet production. They agreed on a rent of 10,000 kroner a month that would begin in May. Now he has his farm, and he begins to gather more supplies for a massive bomb. Via eBay, he orders powdered sulfur from the U.S., which was described on the customs declaration as a yellow artist paint dust. He ordered sodium nitrate from a company in Poland, and more sodium nitrate from a chemist shop in Skien. Also bought ethanol, acetone, caustic soda, flasks, glasses, bottles, funnels, thermometers, masks, and more. He bought a big old fuse, 3-meter-long, slow-burning string that would hopefully take 5 minutes from lighting to explosion. Aside from all that, Anders had also invested in self-improvement. He has started lifting weights again, bought protein powder to increase his muscle mass, milk thistle to strengthen his liver. He bought various supplements to increase his energy. He figured his operation would require sustained concentration, power, and movement over many hours. He started using anabolic steroids. By January 2011, he's fucking serious about this. By 2011, he had completed the required 15 hours of training to obtain a firearms license in Norway. He had also been putting in hundreds of hours on the game Call of Duty Modern Warfare, thinking that would help his shooting accuracy. Around January 15th, he submitted an application to buy a semi-automatic Glock 17. In the meantime, bought a semi-automatic Storm Ruger rifle, along with a special trigger that could make rapid firing easier. Began modifying his bullets, lacing them with liquid nicotine sourced from China, which seems like a fucking weird thing to do and a huge waste of time. I don't know anybody who think that would make the bullets more lethal, but I don't know. Must have made him feel cool. When he couldn't source the silencer he needed, he put on a bayonet on the end of the rifle. Customs declared the bayonet as a sports equipment, or as sports equipment from the U.S. In the log of his book, he carefully wrote out his shopping list, encouraging all interested parties to follow his example, right? This book that he's posting online, these forums. He writes, "There is absolutely no good reason for not getting this equipment out of fear you will be found out. All that is holding you back is unjustified anxiety and laziness. The only reason that could justify your fear is having an Islamic name." February 13th, 2011. This delusional psycho turns 32, does not celebrate his birthday again. No time, too much important work to do. Instead, he started editing a film he was making as a sort of advertisement for his plan, downloading images from anti-Islamic websites, adding music he liked. April 6, 2011, Anders submits a letter to the Norwegian Agricultural Producers Register to change the location of Breivik Geofarm from Oslo to Amet, saying he was now producing roots and tubers. He did this so he could obtain a producer number to get a bunch of fertilizer. But he was so hasty about pushing the forms through that officials began to wonder, and somebody ended up triggering a background check on Breivik. "He keeps on pestering. Is there anything on him?" the official queried in an email to his boss and requested a check, but then nothing showed up. And a week later, confirmation was sent out that the change of use to those supposed roots and tubers had been approved. May 4th, 2011, Anders hires a Fiat Doblo, hires, kind of weird verbiage there, rents a Fiat Doblo, small gray van from Avis Rent-A-Car, and he moves out of his mom's flat officially. He had ordered 6 tons of fertilizer on credit cards. The bags were delivered the day he moved into his new place. That same day, he constructed the metal framework for his bomb. The next day, he started crushing aspirin tablets to extract acetylsalicylic acid. Yeah, acetylsalicylic. Try saying that 10 times in a row. Acetylsalicylic acid. But crushing a bunch of aspirin was tough going, so he put a large sheet of plastic on the floor of the barn, started using a 20-kilo dumbbell to crush this aspirin. But that was just about all that went well. Lots of the instructions he'd found online did not end up leading to anything. The aspirin didn't even give him the acetylsalicylic. God, this fucking word. Acetylsalicylic. Didn't give him the acetylsalicylic. Jesus Christ. Acetylsalicylic acid. What the fuck am I, chemist now? Just useless salicylic acid. To raise his spirits, he went to a nearby restaurant, treated himself to a 3-course meal, then watched a few episodes of The Shield to wind down. Then his subsequent tries did not lead to anything either. I appear to be fundamentally fucked if I cannot manage to find a solution soon, he wrote in his log Saturday, May 7th. When he woke up Sunday morning, he went straight onto the internet. After several hours, he found a YouTube video with a few previous hits, not many views. It showed an unconventional method for extracting the acid he wanted. The guy in the video used a suction pump and a dehumidifier in a lab and succeeded. So on Monday morning, Anders tried doing the same thing himself, using coffee filters and air drying. In the end, he did not know if he had made the desired compound, but decided he'd just have to hope it worked out. He pushed on with making the bomb, only taking a break Saturday, May 14th to watch the finals of the Eurovision Song Contest, and that made me laugh out loud when I first read it. I gotta kill these motherfuckers. I gotta start a continent-wide race war, but first, I want to find out whose song advances. May 17th, he would spend the day making highly concentrated sulfuric acid, a process that would ultimately take him 3 days to get a concentration of more than 70%. Then he transferred 3 tons of fertilizer into 50-kilo bags, which he would then soak in diesel to make detonatable. But first he had to crush the pellets up, and that proved to be really hard work, and soon he hurt his back. He decided to figure out another method, bought 12 different mixers and blenders. Only one worked. Using an Electrolux, it could process a half kilo of fertilizer pellets in 30 seconds, so then he bought more of those. But all that hard work put further strain on him, and he had to spend the first few days of June in bed recovering. But by June 3rd, he was back at it, processing bag after bag after bag of fertilizer, and by June 6th, he had crushed 1,600 kilograms of fertilizer pellets and soaked them in diesel. The next phase would be to synthesize, this is a lot of fucking work, picric acid, his secondary explosive. But that proved difficult, and first batch did not ignite in the oven like he hoped it would. Then on June 11th, the power surge killed his computer, and for the first time in a long while, he prayed. He prayed to God. Dude is praying to God, asking for God's help, and making a bomb he will use to kill as many innocent people as possible. This guy's fucking crazy. I explained to God, he wrote in his diary, that unless he wanted the Marxist Islamic alliance and the certain Islamic takeover of Europe to completely annihilate European Christendom within the next 100 years, he must ensure that the warriors fighting for the preservation of European Christendom prevail. He must ensure that I succeed with my mission. But God didn't listen. His computer stayed dead. Satan won that day. Damn you, Satan! Then he went out and bought a new computer, and he was back on, and Satan was not powerful enough to destroy his second computer, so fuck you, devil. Or Satan lost interest in what Anders was doing, or something. I'm not sure what Satan's plan was. 2 days later, Anders made a test bomb, took it to a remote part of the forest a few kilometers from the farm. He lit the fuse, he waited, and it exploded, and God is good. Anders high-fived Jesus right before Jesus said, and I quote, "Fuck those brown Muslim lovers. They about to get lit. Woo!" And then Jesus pounded a couple cold beers, mumbled something about white power, flew back into white heaven. Oh, God, it was really something. I wish you could have been there to see it. Anders' test run was a massive success for an operation that had been almost entirely made up of failures. It was also good for Anders' morale since by the end of June, 10 of his credit card companies were calling constantly to collect the charges he had accrued. He had a week to find about 80,000 kroner, about 7,000 US bucks, or there were, going to be serious legal action. But he was able to defer payment for half the fertilizer, which pushed him until mid-July before he had to make more payments. So he got a little bit of a reprieve. A couple days later, his new PC shorts out. Damn you, Satan! The devil is back. Back to thwart his plans to kill evil Christians who had been tolerant towards unbelievably not white Muslim immigrants once again. Luckily, God is stronger than Satan, and to the devil's chagrin, numerous Norwegian electronics stores still had computers for sale. And Anders was able to buy another one on another credit card, so fuck you, Beelzebub. Bomb-wise, he proceeded to filter out crystals from the picric acid and now started making his primary explosive, DDMP. Not even going to try and say that fucking insane chemical name. In the evening, he tried, other than the acronym, he tried to relax with some episodes of True Blood and Dexter after working on his DDNP, but he couldn't relax. He was very annoyed that both shows promoted multiculturalism. Seriously. What the fuck? Why are white vampires hanging out with black vampires? Why are white detectives working alongside black, brown, and even Asian detectives? And what color are Asian detectives exactly? Maybe oatmeal? Maybe wheat? Sometimes very pale, though. It's confusing. Sometimes whiter than many of us whites. Are some Chinese people the whitest of the whites? Are they more superior? It's all very upsetting and confusing. Not sure if the Asians upset Anders as much as the traditional blacks or the traditional browns. But at the end of the day, they're just so fucked up and disrespectful that 2 American shows couldn't have all pure white Norwegian actors, nothing but chalk cocks and snow pusses. That's right, chalk cocks. I'm pretty proud of that one. I just came up with that one today. It's a great way to describe male pure whites. July 2nd, 2011. Anders, chalk cock Breivik. Fucking, why can't Norwegian words be pronounced like American words? He goes back to Oslo to get more steroids because he'd run out, and you have to have steroids if you're going to try and combine pull off a terrorist act. He decided to combine this errand with testing the route for his upcoming terrorist operation. He took the E18 highway past Oslo, then the E16 towards Hanafoss. He then spotted an unobtrusive sign for the track to the island of Utoya, drove down the steep hill, parked on the jetty, went over to the boat that was moored there, read on the AUF website that it was called the MS Thorbjørn, named after Thorbjørn Jagland, former Labour Party Prime Minister. He studied the old landing craft, considered whether bullets would penetrate its hull or not, entered the coordinates into his GPS, familiarized himself with the roads in the vicinity, then looked out at the island across the water. It was a very pretty island, bright green, rolling hills. It was set to be the location for a summer camp hosted by the AUF, the youth wing of the ruling Norwegian Labour Party. The camp was an annual event. About 600 kids would attend that summer. And then Anders goes to Oslo now and buys enough anabolic steroids for 20 days. And then takes his mom to an Indian restaurant. Fucking what, Chalk-cock? Why are you taking Snowpuss Mommy to eat brown people food? Very confusing. At this restaurant, that I would like to think is Indian food cooked by only pure whites, he complained about how ugly he had gotten and said he needed veneers. Okay. Then he launched into a rant about all the spiders and the bugs at the farm that were really bothering him. Okay. As they walked out, he snapped at his mom told her not to walk so close to him because he didn't want people to think he had special needs. So mentally, he's doing great. All that time spent alone in the fucking farm, at the farm, making a bomb has not, drugged down his mental capabilities at all. Tip top. Back at the farm, he prepared bags of ammonium nitrate and powdered aluminum now. Now he needed to bend the ammonium nitrate with the aluminum powder, which would intensify the force of the explosion. He did so by hand, getting his rate down to about 60 minutes per bag, which completely coated him in silver powder. Unsurprising then, by the end of July, he was starting to feel seriously ill. But he pushed on. His Chalkcock brothers and Snowpuss sisters were depending on him. If he failed, Norway's Hangi Bangi Hufta would be replaced by Assalamu Alaikum and praise be to Allah. Friday, July 15th. He goes into the nearby town of Rena to catch a train to Oslo, where he will pick up a rental car, then returns, begins to remove the Avis logo from the Volkswagen Crafter with a drill bit. Monday, July 18th, he takes the last batches of picric acid and DDNP out of the oven, and then it's time to load everything into the van. After he does all that, he takes an extra dose of steroids. Because you can't have enough steroids. You got to keep that Chalkcock rock hard. Got to keep those shiny white cue balls small, high, and tight when you're trying to kick off a race war. Wednesday, July 20th, he drove the van into Oslo. He was on the verge of passing out, having slept so little the last few nights. In central Oslo, he parks the van at the Olsen's Window Garden Center. He assumes it will be fine since he had made a logo for a water treatment company and put it on the front of the van. Then he slept that night in his old bedroom, in the old fart room, where for some reason, I imagine he beat off while also crying. I picture him always crying when he beats off for some reason. He just gives me that vibe. Thursday morning, he takes the train back to Reno, then calls a taxi to take him back to the farm. He would return for the booster and detonator, then drive carefully into Oslo in the gray van. Any friction could detonate the van and the mission then and there. He also had his guns, his rifle with the bayonet, the pistol with the laser sight. He'd carved names onto them in runic script. He called his pistol Mjolnir after Thor's hammer. Odin's spear was named Gungnir, which was also the name of Anders' rifle now. At night, as nightfall approached, he parked the gray van outside the garden center next to a Volkswagen Crafter he had rented, or that we'd already mentioned. Then exhausted, he dragged himself back to his mom's house. He knew that one part of the plan, the part he was most excited for actually, probably wasn't going to work out now. At the summer camp on the island, his nemesis, the former Prime Minister Gro Harlem Brundtland, was going to give a speech starting at 11 a.m. He had planned to capture her at gunpoint, make her read a text announcing her betrayal to the nation, and then he would force her to beg for her life, ask him for forgiveness, and then he would not give her for forgiveness, and he would literally cut her head off. Then he would post a video of her decapitation on YouTube. But to get to her on time, he'd have to wake up at 3 in the morning, and he decided he was too tired for that shit. He'd rather beat off and cry, and he decided to abort that part of the mission and wake up around 7 instead. Friday morning, 22nd of July. He wakes up around 7, makes 3 ham and cheese sandwiches, eats one of them, saves the other 2 for later. Then he uses a newly purchased modem and drafts an email with his manifesto and YouTube trailer to send to 8,000 contacts. Then it was time to go to the garden center. He unlocked his smaller rental car, took out the fuse, then he got into the back of the Crafter to mount it on 3 explosives. He left it parked at the garden center, drove his smaller car to the city center, parking in Hammersborg Square, just above the government quarter. Then he took a brisk walk to make sure there were not any new roadblocks. There were not. Then he stopped a taxi driver to ask when people who worked in the government offices tended to get off for their day, and which building was the most, quote, politically significant. Finally, around 12:30, he arrived back home. While Gro Harlem Brundtland was just leaving the stage at the main meeting hall in Utoya, she had given a rousing speech about all the changes that had happened in Norway since she was born in the late 1930s. And in that speech, she had praised the advances of women's rights, but warned there could be backlash. She said they had to keep fighting for equality every day because there was still a lot of stupid fucking dickheads in the world. Not her words exactly, but that was the gist. Banu Rashid, an 18-year-old Muslim immigrant from Iraq and the leader of her chapter of the AUF, watched, listened, and applauded. Her sister, 16-year-old Laura, sat beside her. After the speech, Banu even got to meet Gru because she was her chapter's leader and also because she lent Gru her rain boots because a torrential downpour was still ongoing from the night before. Meanwhile, at home, Anders sent out his manifesto with the subject line of the Islamization of Western Europe and the status of the European resistance movements. Within the email, the heading read Western Patriot, and he introduced the work as a set of advanced ideological, practical, tactical, organizational, and rhetorical solutions and strategies. Then at 2:45, he left his room. The email was still sending and would eventually actually be cut off by spam filters after being delivered to only about 1,000 addresses, so a very small percentage of who he sent it out to. So clearly, Satan struck again. A continual thorn in Anders' side. Always trying to take the hard rock out of his chalk cock. Back at the garden center, Anders unlocked the van, climbed into the back. He changed into a black compression top and put on a plastic police badge on the sleeve, then strapped on a bulletproof vest. At the same time, Gru was boarding the MS Thorbjorn to leave the island, sitting beside her granddaughter, Julie. She got off the island, left for other events that day. Meanwhile, Anders drove the van onto Grugbagata Street. That's a fun word. Where do you live? Grugbagata. Grugbagata. Sorry, Norwegians. A one-way street lined with government buildings on both sides that the government had actually voted to close off to traffic, but that had not been implemented yet. From there, he drove on toward the Tower Block, the 17-story building that housed the Ministry of Justice and the Prime Minister's offices. He had estimated that he had had enough explosives to bring down the entire building. He didn't, but he did have a lot. He parked, took out his lighter, lit the fuse. He had planned to die when he did that, thinking that some gas could have escaped and turned the whole van into an instantaneous powder keg, but the fuse simply lit. Anders then jumped out, grabbed his keys. He did forget his cell phone on the dash, but he remembered to grab his pistol, which he kept in his hand as he now crossed the street and headed to his car. Security guards monitoring the basement via CCTV did not notice the van, but a few minutes after the fuse was lit, one of the receptionists called security to say there was a wrongly parked van outside. One of the guards then rewound footage to watch Anders climb out of the van and thought, well, he seems like a guard of some kind. The security guard decided to ring the driver and vehicle licensing agency to get the name and telephone number of the van's owner just so they could ask him to move. There's no sense of anything terrible happening here. Meanwhile, a young man is walking towards the tower block. His name is John Lavargue, a lawyer who had just finished a report on customs agreements between the European Union and the developing world. He is headed to hand the report in. Afterwards, he had planned to head out with his wife to their hometown to tell their parents some good news. They were expecting their first baby. But that will not happen, because at 3:25 p.m., as he walks around to the tower block, the van explodes near him into a supernova of flames. He is thrown sideways by a pressure wave so strong it kills him before he even hits the ground. He is just fucking torn into little pieces. 2 young women, also lawyers, also killed instantaneously. 2 receptionists are thrown completely out of their seats and over the counter and into the square. Glass blew into the building as everything, doors, windows, cars, became hurtling projectiles. When the blast subsided, 8 lay dead in the square. Only one part of John Vagard's body will land intact on the ground. The rest of him was just fucking eviscerated, just obliterated into nothing. The only thing that survives, his hand with his wedding ring still on the ring finger. Jens Stoltenberg, the prime minister, had decided to work from home that day, but his residence was not far away, and he heard the blast as he prepared the speech he had planned to give at Utoya the next day, at the island, focusing on the economy and employment. Meanwhile, one of his own secretaries in the reception area had been killed instantly. Other workers, many injured, poured out of the building amid smoke and billowing dust. While others fled, a security guard in the basement had managed to call the Oslo police, and as burst pipes began to rain down water, he informed them that a man in a police uniform, had left the van minutes before it blew up. Another tip came in. Someone in the square, a man named Andreas Olsen, had seen a man walking out with a gun. Andreas said the man had gotten into a gray van with the registration number VH24605. It was the car Anders was currently driving. The police officer put the note on the desk of her supervisor, the chief of operations, thought she made eye contact with him, but he actually didn't see her, and the note now just sat there. Big fucking mistake. I don't know why you aren't a little more assertive in this situation. And a harbinger in a way of the massive fuck-ups and lack of a proper procedure for a terrorist attack that was to come. The authorities did not handle this well at all. Oslo did not have any shared alert procedures amongst the police, so the chief of police was actually going through the phone book, ringing staff members one by one. And though more tips came in about the strange man in uniform who'd left in a dark car, no alerts were sent out from the Joint Operational Center at the police headquarters in Oslo. Not to the police force, not to the public, no one. Norway had never had an attack like this. Not from one of their own citizens. Nothing comparable to this had happened since World War II, and they were beyond not prepared. Meanwhile, Anders gets stuck in traffic on his way to get in the opera tunnel, which would lead him towards the island. He had heard on the radio that the explosion had gone off, but didn't know if the city of Oslo would be shut down before he could get out. Unfortunately, but fortunately for him, no roadblocks had been set up. Nothing was closed. All available manpower had been sent on a rescue mission into the city center. He drove through heavy traffic from the eastern city center to emerge around the U.S. Embassy, which was now swarming with security personnel. At 3:55 p.m., half an hour after the bomb went off, an operator finally saw that note lying on the desk about the license plate number and called Olsen back. Olsen reiterated that what he had seen, a European man in his 30s, the vehicle with the plate number. The operator then relayed the report to a patrol from the emergency response squad, but it was impossible to get through on the radio, so she called them on their cell phone. At 4:03 p.m., Breivik passed a police station in Sandvika on the E18. If any of the officers had been looking out of their windows, they would have seen his silver gray car driving past them on the main road. Sandvika had men ready and waiting, but they didn't know what to do with them, and they were awaiting a request for assistance from Oslo. 2 minutes later, the operator in Oslo makes a mobile phone call to the emergency response unit, informing them of a man in a dark uniform driving a Fiat Doblo, but that call came in 2 minutes too late. She also gave them that registration or license plate number. The patrol said the description was too vague for any action to be taken, though. Fucking ridiculous. One patrol that did have the information actually decided not to follow up because they were busy transporting a prisoner, even though their superior had already told them to put that task on hold while they investigated. Everything that could be bungled was being bungled. Many of Norway's different districts offered support, but nearly all of them were declined. Parliament requested reinforcement, but was denied, along with the Labour Party offices and the House of the People. Meanwhile, the emergency response unit requested the use of the country's only police helicopter 2 times and was denied twice. And yes, they had literally one fucking helicopter in all of Norway. This kind of shit does not happen. The pilot was told his services weren't needed and that he could just return to enjoying his vacation. Don't even worry about it. Fucked up. 4:16 p.m. Anders passes Sundbyhegdo. Down to his left lay Tirafjorden, right? The big lake. He will soon be inside of the island. On the island, young people are busy with a combination of political activities and regular summer camp pastimes, right? They're playing soccer, debating, attending seminars, making out in the fucking bushes, whatever. 17-year-old Mari Johansson, a student at Grief Forest High School who is interested in music, dance, and drama, and 18-year-old Simon Saibo decided to take a seminar on something they knew nothing about, geopolitics of the Western Sahara. During the seminar, a boy stood up and reported that there had been a big explosion in Oslo. Camp activities were quickly redirected. Everyone gathered in the main hall to hear AUF leader Eskil Petersen's updates on the explosion. The camp's head of security, Monica Boisi, a slight woman in her mid-40s, came onto the stage and told the young people they could call their parents if they wanted to. She'd been working at the camp for over 20 years. Her husband, John, was the ferry captain. This was also going to be her last summer on the island. She had just gotten a new job as the director of Norway's Maritime Museum. Right now, she wanted to take care of her kids, told them they would have a huge feast that night. They could eat as many sausages as they wanted. Nobody worry about anything. You're all safe. Utøya was the safest place for them to be right now, she said. Well, Simon didn't believe her, and he told Mari as much. He said that if whoever was attacking the government, whoever it was that was attacking the government, that meant they were attacking the Labour Party, and they were at the largest Labour Party event in the whole country right now. Simon called his dad, requested a call back if there was new information about the bomb. Meanwhile, Anders is pulling into a little clearing above the jetty. The next boat's going to be leaving at 5. While he waits, officials are still working on a nationwide alert to the police. 1 hour and 18 minutes after the explosion, they finally released the following alert. Nationwide alert, explosion, potential bombs in central Oslo. All units requested to be on alert for a small gray van, possible registration 24605. As of now, unknown relationship between explosion and vehicle, but if it is located, alert desk or Oslo pending further instructions. What the alert did not say was the initial letter code for the license plate number. They left that out. And they forgot to say that the driver had been observed wearing a police uniform. Crucial details, another big fuck up. But it didn't really matter because very few police stations even had the technology to receive the alert. Meanwhile, Anders went down to the jetty, identified himself as a police officer who'd been sent over because of the bombing in Oslo. The students gathered there said that the 5 o'clock boat had been canceled because of the explosion. But Anders said, no, they need that boat. He said there were 2 more police officers on the way, and he needed to get to the island immediately to secure the area before they arrived. And the students believed him. I mean, why wouldn't they? If they had received an alert letting them know the bomber was dressed like a police officer who looked exactly like Anders, I imagine they would have been a bit skeptical. The boat with Anders on board now sets off from the island towards the mainland to come pick up Anders and bring him back to the island. Monica Bosai who had ridden over on the boat, ran up to Breivik when the boat docked, asking why they hadn't been informed of the police sweep. Anders replied it was because of all the chaos in Oslo, and he began dragging a heavy black case over towards the boat. Monica told him he would have to hide his rifle so none of the campers would be scared, and he agreed. He wheeled the black case onto the boat. They set off. Monica tried to ply him for answers, but the police officer would not give her any information. The boat docked. The captain offered to drive the black case up to the main building, leaving to get the only vehicle on the island. A guard, Trond Bernsen, came up to meet Anders, who introduced himself as Martin Nielsen. The other guard on the island, Rune Havdal, came to join them, asking Martin Nielsen, but really Anders, what precinct he was from and what his assignment was. Anders now started to stumble. He was not prepared for this kind of questioning. He freezes, and then he says they should all go up to the main building, where he will give them a proper report on the bombing. He follows Bernstein up the rain-slick, grassy slope, gripping his rifle firmly. With his other hand, he unfastens his holster and takes out his pistol. Then he raises it and fires. And so it begins. Bernstein and Monica, the camp's head of security, are both shot at close range. And then Anders fires 2 more shots into each of their heads to make sure they're dead. The poor boat captain, John, arrives just in time to see his wife executed. That fucking poor bastard. He turns, starts to run. He screams, "Run for your lives." The other guard, Rune Havdal, is heading for the clump of trees now, but he won't make it. He didn't have a gun on him. From what I can tell, no one did. Only Anders. It is truly like shooting fish in a barrel for Anders. Rune is the next to be gunned down, first with a bullet in his back to incapacitate him, then murdered with a shot to the head. Screams now echo as teens begin to scramble about chaotically, looking for a safe haven. It's 5:22 p.m. Anders now moves slowly as he follows the biggest group of teens back towards the campsite. Meanwhile, Laura Rashid, the 16-year-old sister of Banu, who had given her shoes to Gru, hears a bang and then several more. She's in the bathroom block at the end of the campsite, and she runs outside to see what the fuck is going on. She realizes she needs to be running for a different reason now to go hide. She heads for the trees, barefoot down the hill where it starts to slope towards the shore. Meanwhile, Simon, Mari, their friend Viljar, and a few others are trying to keep a group of campers calm. They keep telling others that they're supposed to meet in the middle of the island like the police officer said. And then Mari shouts when a 14-year-old boy tries to break away and has his 17-year-old brother go get him back. Then the uniformed man enters Mari's field of vision. He's talking to a girl wearing a gray AUF sweatshirt, and then abruptly, he takes out his pistol, shoots her in the head. Mari now screams for her group to run. Breivik opens fire on them with the rifle, bullets hurtling towards them at 800 meters per second. They run down on a trail called Lover's Path until they come to a bend where the rusty fence is broken and a log has been wedged across the gap. They skid down until they find a ledge where they can hide. Unfortunately, there were not many such places on the island. It was mostly open space, freshly mowed grass, steep slopes, and scattered trees. At 5:24 p.m., 2 minutes after the chaos had begun, the police on the mainland received an emergency call from the captain, John, who said a man dressed as a police officer was shooting people on the island. A minute later, Anders walks back across the campsite. He killed 3 people by the landing stage, 3 more by the main entrance, 1 at the campsite, and then 2 on the way there. Now he walked into the cafe in the main hall. A girl stuck her head out to ask him for help. He told her to lie down, said he would come back in a second, and then he went into the building. The walls were covered with AUF posters. In the first meeting room, he opened the door and started shooting. When the kids fell to the floor, he calmly walked up to each of them, emotionless, and made sure they were dead with a single shot to their heads. Some of the remaining kids stood there, frozen or begging him for their lives. He shot one girl mid-scream. He killed a girl who was pretending to be asleep on the piano, and he killed other kids hiding behind the piano. One of those hiding behind the piano was Ina Leibach, a friend of Banu and Lara's. A shot went through both her hands and another through the top of her arm. I can survive this, she thought to herself. But then she took a third shot to the jaw. Eyes closed, she crouched there trying to hold her mangled jaw in place. She couldn't see the man who was firing, but she could hear him breathing above him, or above her. Then she felt a 4th bullet enter her chest. Shots like that kill you, she thought. There was a taste in her mouth she had never had before. Gunpowder. She lost feeling in her arms and thought her hands had been shot off. Then there was a click. The magazine was empty. Anders calmly changed magazines as more kids ran to escape. He walked to the door and he picked off a girl who played bass for a band called Blondies and Brownies. Then he went out into the main hall. A boy was hiding behind a loudspeaker there, and Breivik saw him and opened fire. The boy ducked several times. Breivik had his work cut out for him, trying to hit him. He fired 5 or 6 shots, missed every time, but then he got him. The boy went down, and now Anders walked over, shot him twice more. A girl named Elizabeth Lai ran screaming along the wall, on the phone with her father. She was still on the phone talking to her dad when a bullet entered her ear canal, seared through her head, and went out the other ear. Anders killed her and ruined her father's life with a single shot. He kept going down the wall, trying to pick kids off from a distance, then closing in to shoot the remaining ones down. Then he left the building with 13 dead at 5:29 p.m. He crossed the campsite, shooting into a few tents before he moved on. Meanwhile, the chief of operations at Hanafus on the mainland was calling in reinforcements, once again dialing them one by one on their cell phones. 4 officers ran into the equipment store to grab weapons and protective gear. They started to prepare the police dinghy, forgetting the ferry, which could have gotten a large convoy to the island in just over 15 minutes. Since the ferry had not been contacted, John, the captain, was running his own rescue mission now. 8 people got on. John sped away with them, but when they were halfway across, he wanted to turn around and rescue more people. There were kids jumping into the cold water trying to swim away, he was seeing. Laura was lying behind some rocks down at the shoreline, but Banu was by the campsite, hidden by some trees with 2 other girls. The group saw a boy being shot down by the cafe. They took off up the hill behind the campsite over to Lover's Path, where they met an 18-year-old named Anders Christensen. They all huddled behind a slight rise in the ground now, but then they heard footsteps, and they decided to pretend to be dead as Anders Breivik approached. But he knew they were not dead. First, he shot a boy, then Banu, then Anders, then the girl who had been with Banu. Then a bullet crashed through the head of the second girl, Marta, who had just heard her best friend die. Simon and Mari, meanwhile, hear the shots getting closer. They tried to hustle the younger kids into the hiding spot. Some of them already were shot, but then Mari saw black boots around the bend. Mari now slides down a cliff, lays flat on the ground. She breaks her foot on impact as she's sliding down. Simon slides down too. Breivik starts to fire. He shoots 3 girls at the top of the cliff who did not die instantly, but would bleed to death. Then he shoots Simon in the ankle. Simon plunges off of the cliff. Another bullet smashes through his back and he lands on a rock, not moving. Then Viljar gets shot, the 17-year-old who had tried to get his 14-year-old brother Torhi to stay. Now they knew there was no more running, or maybe only swimming. They slide down the cliff, land at the water's edge. Viljar takes a bullet to the shoulder and the thigh, takes more bullets as he tries to make it into the water. His hand almost gets shot off. A 5th shot hits him in the fucking eye. He is somehow still alive. Ilva Schwenke, a 14-year-old that Simon had lifted down from the path, had been hit in both thighs and in the stomach, then in the neck. She pressed her hand over the bullet wound as she cried out to her childhood friend and cried out to Viljar that she was dying. And then Breivik moved on. It was 5:35 p.m. Viljar discovered that his fingers were hanging on by some scraps of skin. His skull was shattered, but he knew he was thinking and breathing and needed to think of something happy. So he started calling out to his friend Simon, who now lay dead on the rocks. He said that they were going to get through this. And then Viljar stops shouting and falls silent. 14-year-old Torhi, meanwhile, swims along the edge of the island, finds a large crevice in the limestone cliff. Soon others join him. Then at 5:38 p.m., the first patrol leaves the police station. Breivik is now moving south. He fires at someone swimming, then at Johannes, Torhi's best friend, and at a 17-year-old girl named Gizem. At 5:42 p.m., the task force of 26 men leaves the capital, finally en route to the island. Parents who had been phoned during the chaos are now trying to get to the island as well, except they get detained at roadblocks. Banu and Laura's dad, Mustafa Rashid, gets a text. "We love you more than anything in the world. Banu and Laura, there is a man with a gun here. We will ring when we are safe." In reality, it was just Laura who had written this. She had no idea Banu was already dead. At 5:52 p.m., a local patrol from the nearest police station reaches the MS Thorburn jetty. Now a bunch of police officers are there, standing, waiting for the dinghy, occasionally taking cover while shots crack out from across the sound, only 600 meters or a little over a third of a mile away. But the boat still hadn't shown up. Hanafus Fire Service had actually offered their boat, but they were turned down since the precinct said, don't worry about it, they had their own boat. Why the fuck would they say that? Just bring all the boats. They said they had their own boat, but that boat was out of gas and in the garage behind the station. Then when they called to say they did need the boat after all, now they couldn't get through because they were dialing the wrong fucking number. Holy shit, these guys were wildly unprepared. They almost could not fuck up more than they did. Meanwhile, the Delta Emergency Response Unit, those guys from Oslo, they didn't know where fucking Utoya Island was. The first patrol had GPS, but the small islands were not named in the system, and as they called the police already on the scene, the lines jammed up and they couldn't get through. My God. The local police, meanwhile, wrongly assumed that the Delta Force is arriving by helicopter straight to the island, but they're not because they told that guy to stay on his vacation and enjoy himself. When this incorrect assumption is finally cleared up, the local force tells Delta to, quote, meet them on the jetty, but the Delta representative only knew of a jetty at a golf course, so they agreed to meet at that golf course, which is 3.5 kilometers from the fucking island, so they go in the wrong direction. The original spot where they should have met was 600 meters away. Meanwhile, Breivik stood by a low red building known as the schoolhouse. He fired through the door, heard screams, but the door wouldn't budge. He had a can of diesel on him to set the building on fire and pick off people as they ran out, but he didn't have a lighter. So now he moves on to the cafe. By this time, he had shot and killed 40 people on the island and realized it was almost time to give himself up. He figured the police would be there soon. He didn't realize how fucking incompetent they were and that they would probably kill him on sight. He finds a mobile phone, rings the emergency number 112, gets through to Hanafus at 6:01 p.m. Yes, good afternoon, he says. My name is Commander Anders Behring Breivik of the Norwegian anti-communist resistance movement. And they just say, yes? I'm on Utoya at the moment. I want to give myself up. And then they just say, okay, what are you calling from? What number are you calling from? What the fuck's the matter? What number he's calling from? They know that people are fucking being killed on this island. He's saying he's a guy from oh my God. He says, I'm calling on a mobile. And they just say, you're calling from your mobile? And then he says, well, it's not my mobile, another one. And then the call cuts out. It was a mobile phone with no SIM card that Breivik had found. So the number did not come up on the screen at the police station. And he decides that this means that he should just keep shooting since they don't seem too concerned about him. So now he walks to the water where he comes across a few teens. He shoots and kills 3. Then at the bathing area, he finds another group, kills 5 more. My fucking God. Next, he comes across another group lying in the grass. Amongst them is Laura. They are holding Ina Leibuk, the girl who'd been shot by the piano, the girl who was holding onto her jaw as she stumbled out of the building. Each kid was holding a stone to one of her wounds. They see him approach, and luckily, he does not see them. He instead focuses on a group hiding behind a pumping station. A little ways away, he calls out that he had not caught the gunman yet, but that there was a boat ready to evacuate them if they could come right away. A couple of girls get up. One asked if he is a real police officer. His answer is to pull out his gun and start shooting her. A girl named Andrine runs as he mows down kids running up the steep slope, and she feels blood fill her mouth. She had been shot in the back. Her lung had been punctured. She collapses as he moves forward and takes aim, but suddenly a boy leaps up and takes 3 bullets for her and saves her life. His name was Henrik Rasmussen. He died as the 3rd bullet blew apart his brain. Meanwhile, the kids at the pumping station, Laura included, ran for water, started to swim. She swam to a cavity where she could hide from all angles and watch as a civilian boat set out from the opposite shore to pull kids out of the water. Delta, meanwhile, is over at the fucking golf course. And then, oh my God, their fucking incompetence continues. They try to get onto the police dinghy with all of their heavy equipment and it starts to sink. And nobody thinks, maybe I should fucking get off. Maybe only some of us should go forward. No, they just yell at the driver to keep going. And then he tries to, and the boat still sinking. Now the engine sputters and dies, and they're just fucking stuck in the water. Then a civilian boat tries to rescue them, but then that boat too becomes overloaded when not a single one of these motherfuckers thinks, maybe only half of us should get on it. And they just barely kind of sputter along, not moving fast at all, slowly moving down. These guys are fucking morons. Sorry. I'm sure it was chaotic and stuff, but did they receive literally any training? Were they just over there fucking eating softest ice cream for the last 8 years? Just thinking like, it sure is fun to be a police officer. Oh my God. When another craft comes for some men, the boats move faster, but still they've wasted precious time while this guy keeps killing. Luckily, he's almost out of ammunition. And now this mass murderer has been left alone on the island to do what he wants for so long, since no one in Norway apparently has any idea of how to handle a situation like this, that he gets bored and decides to call the police again. This is insane. This time at 6:26 p.m. He's been there forever. He gets through quickly, and then he gets and then they transfer him to a district far away from the action. And he says, "Can you put me through to the Delta operations manager?" And they're just like, "Yeah." They're not like, "Why? What's going on?" He says, "I'm on Utoya. I've completed my operation, so I want to give myself up." And again, they're not like, "Oh my God, you're the murderer." They just say, "You want to give yourself up, yes?" And he goes, "Yeah." And they say, "What did you say your name was?" And he says, "Anders Behring Breivik." "And you were a commander of," they ask. And he says, "Knights Templar Europe. The organization is called, but we are organized in the anti-communist resistance movement against the Islamization of Europe and Norway." And the fucking police dispatch just goes, yes. And then he says, we have just carried out an operation on behalf of the Knights Templar. And they just go, yes. And he says, Europe and Norway. And again, they just say, yes. And he says, and in view of the fact test, the operation is complete, then it is acceptable to surrender to Delta. And then he don't say anything. And he says, can you put me through to the chief of operations at Delta? And he says, well, the thing is, you're talking to someone with, in a way, superior authority. Okay, just find out what you need to, and then call me on the phone here. All right. But what about telephone number? Brilliant. Bye. I haven't got the telephone number. Hello. Once again, he had called from a phone without a working SIM card. But until they called him back, which they would not do, actually, he decided just to continue south. Yeah. If this was a movie and not a darkly tragic, horrific event, it would be a fucking slapstick comedy. The Norwegian authorities, they might as well be dressed up as circus clowns. Just running around in circles, just slamming into each other, falling down, like running in the wrong directions, like their eyes are crossed. They're holding their guns upside down. You know, fucking Benny Hill music is just playing in the background. Just, it's absurd. Hangy bang! Oh, this way! No, it's this way! Hangy bang! Just fucking nonsense. Meanwhile, the fastest boat reaches the island finally at 6:27 p.m. 4 men from the emergency response unit are dropped off at the landing stage. Some AUF members come running up, point north, since that was the last place Anders Breivik had shot anyone. But since then, he'd gone south. Delta heads north. Meanwhile, Anders just keeps killing. A couple of girls call out for help, thinking he was a good officer. He goes right up to them, opens fire. Then he stands by the water, sees several people swimming. A yellow speedboat comes towards him to pick up some of the swimmers, so Anders shoots at it, then it goes away. Another boat of 6 officers now arrives on the island. Since they heard shots, they knew Anders had not headed north, but south. He hits 5 children while they're on the way. Then he stands over a boy who yells, "You killed my dad, you killed my dad. You've got to stop shooting now. You've done enough killing, leave us alone." Anders tells him it was going to be all right, before he then turns to head up to the base for more ammo. Then in a thicket, he finally runs into Delta. And they shout that they are armed police, and they ask him to put his hands up. Anders casually props his rifle against a tree. They don't shoot. He calmly walks towards them. As he approaches them, they scream at him to not come closer, to lie on his stomach, to get down on his knees. They say both those things. Lie down on your stomach, get down on your knees. Now he says, irritated, make up your minds, kneeling or lying. And then he calmly lowers himself to the ground. And then finally they put the handcuffs on him. As they bind him, they take his pistol and ID. They tell him that, or he tells them, that he was not after them, that they were his brothers in the fight. They ignore him, still on the lookout for other gunmen. Anders said he was the only one, but he also is saying that other cells will be mobilized soon. Eventually, he's led up to a main hall, which Delta has designated its headquarters, right where Monica and the security guards have been shot and killed, and there Anders gives an interview. The Delta interrogators said he didn't have to, but he was eager to talk. And why the fuck? Why are they saying that? Maybe it's some Norwegian law I don't know about. But I love, he's like, I want to tell you everything. I want to confess. And they're like, I would get a lawyer. You don't have to, buddy. All right, think about it before you talk. He says, I've sacrificed myself. I have no life after this. I may very well suffer and be tortured for the rest of my life. I shall never get out. But what is it you actually want me to talk about? They asked him, well, what the fuck was he hoping to achieve with all that carnage? And he said, we want to take power in Europe within 60 years. That is a crazy person's answer. Why did I do this? Well, over the next 60 years, we're working on some shit. He says, I'm a commander of the Knights Templar. Our organization was set up in London in 2002 with delegates from 12 countries. Just pure madness. He stressed that he and his team were not Nazis. That's okay. All right. And then he says they did support Israel. All right. What police really wanted to know was whether there were other weapons on the island, bombs, other explosives, booby traps, etc. He's like, no. He also told them he wanted some bandages for a tiny cut on his hand. He complained that he might bleed out and die soon. Did he ask them to pour some hydrogen peroxide on it as well? Maybe have one of them kiss his boo-boo, make it all better? Meanwhile, more police officers began to arrive on the beaches where the surviving teens had huddled or collapsed. The teens had no idea whether or not to trust them, if the boats were full of other terrorists who had come to finish them off or not. They figured that either they were saved or the end had finally arrived. Viljar, the 17-year-old who had been almost just completely blasted apart, was not moving but still had a weak pulse somehow. Medics carefully held his head together, working to literally fit his brain back into the shattered remains of his skull. How is he still alive? Torhi, his 14-year-old brother, was picked up by a boat after hiding in the water for hours. A girl had to be dragged away from their friend Simon since the police said the dead would be picked up later. Lara Rashid, still not knowing that her sister Banu had been shot to death, was picked up from a watery enclave by a boat. She was told not to look back at the island, but did so anyway and screamed. All along the shore lay bloody young people. Some on the rocks, some halfway into the water. Big stains of red spread across the landscape. Bloody clothes and shoes and piles where kids had left them as they attempted to swim away. Laura and the other survivors were now taken to a nearby hotel where parents were told to meet their kids. Parents that still didn't know if their kids were alive or not. Another parent was about to hear some terrible news. Venko, Anders' mother. Anders had told her that he was running errands that day and would be back in time for dinner. But she waited, he still wasn't back. Then she started watching the TV, was horrified by the news of the bombing and the shootings. When Anders did not answer his phone, she started to worry that he had been hit by the bomb. At 9:40 p.m., the police then came to her house, picked her up, and informed her that her son was wanted in connection with a serious crime. Venko seemed to be most upset about how her friends would take the news, that her social life would be ruined. And she said, that this getting associated with her son, doing all these terrible things, was, quote, almost as bad as being gay or lesbian. What a fucking weird thing to say. Oh my God, everyone's going to know I'm the mother of a monster. I might as well be a lesbian. Anders, meanwhile, now transported to the local police station on the mainland. Then at 4 a.m. on July 23rd, he is taken to the main police station in Oslo, where Venko had just left and requested Geir Lipestad, a lawyer he had once rented a place from, to be his defense attorney. He then gave the police an insane list of demands. He wanted the computer to use for a minimum of 8 hours a day, and he needed access to Wikipedia. Most importantly, he needed to serve his sentence with as few Muslims as possible and never be forced to eat any halal meat. He's batshit crazy. He also said he really wanted to wear his Knights Templar uniform to his trial. And he agreed not to have his cells execute all Class A and Class B traitors if Parliament was dissolved. Yeah, sure, bud. We'll get right on that. A few hours later, speaking to a crowd of parents and survivors still waiting to hear about children who had not turned up yet at the hotel, Prime Minister Jens Stoltenberg confirmed the total deaths from the island at 84. He was actually wrong. The total was 69, but still that is so many. To put that number in context, 15 teens died in the Columbine massacre. 2 of them were the gunmen themselves. Anders killed over 5 times as many victims in just his attack on the island, and he wounded 110 others. And all but a few were teenagers. And, he also detonated a bomb that killed an additional 8 adults and wounded over 200 others, 209. So 77 dead, 319 injured. Many of the dead and wounded were still on the island, being identified, tagged, put into body bags, while a full 24 hours after the bomb went off, Anders finally agreed to tell the full story. Sunday, July 24th, marked the day of a church service in Oslo that would honor the victims. Once again, the Prime Minister speaks. We are all shaken by what has happened to us, but we will never relinquish our values. Our answer is more democracy, more openness, and more humanity, but never naivete, Jens Stoltenberg said. That day, doctors decided to amputate Viljar's left arm. When they announced it to the family, 14-year-old Torhi, his brother, tucked his left arm into his sweater so he could teach Viljar how to do tasks with one arm after he woke up from his coma. Sunday was also the day that Anders' 76-year-old father, Jens, found out the terror attacks he had been reading about on the BBC had been committed by his son. Man, if he didn't like him after the graffiti, he really didn't like him now. After 3 days of chaos, Anders will be charged July 25th. On the 8th floor of the law courts, Judge Kim Hager charged Breivik under paragraph 147 of the Norwegian Penal Code, which carries a maximum penalty of 21 years in prison with the possibility of extension if Breivik represents a danger to society. Anders, in turn, demanded to be set free. Yeah, I hear you, but I want to be released now. I've decided I don't care for prison. I would rather go out and kill more people. Thank you very much. His demands, of course, not granted. On Wednesday and Thursday, the families of Simon, Banu, and Anders Christensen would finally see their children as corpses in a chapel. Also on Thursday, Viljar came down with several bad infections. He still hadn't woken up. One of his friends, fellow AUF member Martin Elgensen, came down from their hometown to visit him. He'd only been spared because he had failed German and his mom had signed him up for remedial courses instead of letting him attend the AUF summer camp. Martin now sat beside his friend's bedside, sang songs until finally Viljar opened his remaining eye and miraculously woke up. But now let's focus on the trial for a bit. From July to December, 2 forensic psychiatrists prepared a report on Breivik published in December of 2011, finding he was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. However, subject to massive criticism from legal and psychiatric experts, the court decided to appoint 2 different psychiatrists to make another report. And on April 10th, 2012, they found that he was legally sane, and therefore the trial should continue. The trial would begin Monday, April 16th, 2012. It started in typical Breivik fashion, with him saying that he did not recognize the legitimacy of the court because it derived his authority from parties supporting multiculturalism. Fuck yeah, bro. That chalk cock ain't gonna take shit from some brown clowns. No, sir. No way, Jose. I mean, no way, Pure White Joseph. Get that dude some snow puss. Let him go already. Anders also claimed that the presiding judge, Venko Elizabeth Artson, was a close friend of Han Harlem, the sister of Gro Harlem Brundtland. But then Geir Lippestad, his own lawyer, told him that was not true. There was no conflict of interest. The charges of voluntary homicide and committing acts of terror were then read out to Breivik by prosecutor Inga Bajor Eng. The new reported dead totals were 8 in the bombing and a total of 77 when you include the island massacre. When asked to plead after hearing the charge sheet, Breivik responded that he acknowledged that he had committed the offenses but pleaded not guilty because he was acting out of necessity. His defense team then outlined Breivik's sad little life in the previous 3 decades, including his life on World of Warcraft. They also played his 12-minute YouTube trailer, and at one point, Anders began to cry. And probably beat off, secretly. On the second day, April 17th, Anders would begin testifying. He gave a speech that was basically just him reading his 1,500-page manifesto, barely edited, so that was fun for everyone to hear. On the third day, April 18th, he greeted the court with a fist salute, even though he had been asked not to do so out of respect for victims. Interestingly enough, Breivik himself commented during his testimony that there ought to be only one of 2 possible outcomes in the case for him: a death penalty or an acquittal. He said a maximum 21-year sentence was, quote, pathetic. Yeah, it is. April 19th, he told the court something horrifying, that his intention had not been to kill 69 people on the island, but to kill everyone, all 600. He also described his plan to behead Gro Harlem Brundtland, talked about he was bummed that he wasn't able to do so. The next day after the weekend, he described the massacre on the island kill by kill, talking about how something surprised him, like the sound a bullet makes when it enters a person, or how a lot of the kids simply froze when they saw him coming, and he found that odd. Then he said that despite what he did, he was ordinarily a very nice person. And I'm sure everyone present was like, oh yeah, totally. I mean, you do seem, other than the murders, like a really nice guy. The following day, April 23rd, he tells the court about how he was a victim as well, how he had lost everything, how he had to do something cruel but necessary because it would avoid the deconstruction of Norwegian society via multiculturalism. Day 7 in the trial, April 24th, would see the first witness to the prosecution. Day 7 and Day 8 would involve bombing survivors giving testimony. Also on Day 8, Breivik took the stand for a second time to give some objections to his psychiatric report, saying that many of what had been said about him was fabricated to make him look bad. More testimony about the bombing would take place over the following days, and on May 11th, a spectator intended to throw a shoe at Anders, but hit one of his defense attorneys instead. It was thrown by the brother of Iraqi immigrant Kassar Asim, who had been killed on the island. Then on from May 23rd to May 25th, the survivors of the island massacre spoke about how they had tried to get away, about the friends they had seen killed, about the friends who had in some cases sacrificed themselves to save others. On June 5th, defense lawyers called a bunch of right-wing extremists in an attempt to make Anders look, I don't know, like the member of a movement who shared his ideals instead of a crazy lone wolf, I guess. All of those extremists reiterated that they did not stand for violence, so. Next would follow a long argument about whether that first report that found Breivik insane would be upheld. Finally, on the last day of trial, June 22nd, Breivik delivered a 45-minute speech summarizing the trial from his perspective. I'm sure everyone was happy to hear that. Then the trial ended with the prosecution recommending that Breivik should be confined indefinitely to psychiatric care, and the defense argued that Breivik should be considered sane, but acquitted as his actions were in self-defense. Okay? Can you imagine letting that dude just go after all that? Maybe they should have, so some of the victims' family members could have killed him. August 24, 2012, the court begins to read their verdict against Breivik. He was judged to be sane, sentenced to containment, a special form of prison sentence in Norway that can be extended indefinitely, with a time frame of 21 years and a minimum time of 10 years, the maximum penalty in Norway. That's fucking crazy. The maximum for literally any crime in Norway was 21 years. Since that attack, because of that attack, a new penal code was provided for a 30-year maximum sentence for crimes related to genocide, crimes against humanity, or some other war crimes. That's fucking insane. You can commit genocide and you're like, all right, you get 30 years. What are you doing, Norway? My God. Why won't you just add a life sentence for crimes as heinous as that? For fuck's sake. That's ridiculous. The 21-year sentence can be extended over and over, but still, why even offer people a small chance at redemption? Who do things like that? That's hearing his sentence, Anders sang his same old song that he did not recognize the legitimacy of the court and would therefore neither accept nor appeal the decision. He would then be sent back to an SHS section, a high security prison section where he would be isolated from other inmates and only have access to healthcare workers and guards. And he's been in isolation most of his sentencing. He would also be given a PlayStation 2, though, access to a gym. He would stay in a 3-room cell. What? He'll be given a computer, no internet, but still. And this dickhead will write a letter to prison authorities in November of 2012 complaining that he wanted a PlayStation 3 because it had more suitable games, and he also needed a sofa and a bigger gym. He'll get a sofa. He'll get to have some birds as pets. He'll get access to a kitchen with a dishwasher. He'll eventually get better gaming consoles. He has a better setup now than he did when he was living with mom in his fucking fart room. Still in September of 2015, he threatens a hunger strike, then sues the government of Norway in 2016 over his solitary confinement and the fact he'd been subject to, quote, degrading treatment, including hundreds of strip searches and frequent searches of his cell, including at night. How dare they? He also complained that he wanted other activities besides floorball or chess. He complained that he was not allowed to make frozen pizzas except for one time. This is in his lawsuit. And he fucking bitched about how he didn't have access to a metal thermos, so sometimes his coffee would get cold. Oh, and he said he was pissed off that a lot of times he had to wait too long for the guard to get his toothbrush or to turn off his TV. And he said that during his time in prison, he had started, this is an actual complaint he made. What the fuck is going on over Norway's legal system? Why is this shit tolerated on any level? He said that during his time in prison, he had started to love reality TV, which was evidence that his brain had become damaged and that was Norway's fault. It sounds like they should just kill him and put him out of his misery. He actually won his argument that he was being mistreated at his initial trial. His conditions breached an article of the European Convention on Human Rights, but then that verdict was appealed, and in the appellate court, he lost on all counts in 2017. November of 2020, Breivik had an interaction with another prisoner for the first time in the presence of at least 7 prison officers. The 2 prisoners played cards, talked for about 2 hours. They would meet a second time, but then this other prisoner would choose not to have a third meeting with Breivik, according to media reports in January of 2021. I guess he didn't like him. Dude can't even make a friend in prison. He's insufferable to be around. To make up for the isolation, he has access still to that computer that he uses to write letters. Prison has not done a lot to change him. His own lawyer recently said he had become a diehard Nazi in prison and a fascist. He was denied parole in 2021, a decision which was upheld in 2022, possibly because he said he was going to continue pursuing white supremacy by peaceful means now. And saying that there's even a chance he could be released. In 2022, he was transferred to Ringerike prison, where he is now held in a 2-story complex with a kitchen, dining room, TV room, and an Xbox, several cushy armchairs, some nice black and white pictures of the Eiffel Tower on the wall. He has a new fitness room with weights, a treadmill, a rowing machine, 3 parakeets, also has like a universal gym machine. I saw some pictures. February of 2024, the court convened again to determine if lacking outside contact was doing something bad to his mental health. As if his mental health wasn't so fucked long before he showed up in prison. And also, who gives a fuck about his mental health? If he's depressed, just give him a rope and a rickety chair. Some psychiatrists say that Breivik's mental health is deteriorating. During his last hearing, he broke down, said he had lost his will to live. And again, like literally, who cares? November of 2024, it was reported by Reuters that his second attempt at parole, not approved, possibly because he maintained that his killings were necessary for the good of Norway. Luckily, at least a few of his victims are doing better than he is. It was hard to find info on very many of them. But we do know that today, Lara Rashid is a journalist. She's successful. Viljar Hansen is a lawyer. Got engaged this past year. Both he and Laura still seem to be involved in politics. Viljar's little brother, Torhi, is, according to his Instagram profile at least, spending a lot of time with his big bro and making music. Many of the survivors are now in their late 20s to mid-30s, some of them with their own children fighting for a better world, and that will take us out of this timeline.
Good job, soldier. You made it back. barely.
Anders Breivik. What an insufferable, chock-cock son of a bitch. What a delusional Melvin. When we look back at Anders Breivik, is there a pattern we can see across his life that can tell us more about how to maybe prevent somebody like him from doing what he did in the future? Should we regulate people's access to certain online conspiracies? Like the one about how Muslims are intentionally outbreeding Norwegians so they can turn their nation into a fundamentalist caliphate full of Christian-hating jihadists? Should we regulate people's access to paranoid, hateful sites like Stormfront? Would that actually stop anything? Or would that just needlessly infringe on free speech and push more conspiratorial people towards places like the dark web to pursue more info on conspiracies that now seem more legitimate because the powers that be are actually trying to keep that info hidden? I think restricting access to information would probably just make things worse in so many ways. A very bad, slippery slope to start walking down. Instead, with Anders and people like him, what if we looked into this? What one factor, more than anything else, pushed Anders from being an online troll into taking real horrific action against others? And I think the answer can be found in Breivik's childhood, but maybe not where you might think. Over and over as graffiti tagger and later as a player on World of Warcraft, Breivik felt the need to punch far above his weight class. He was just a little guy, a bit player, but he acted like a king. It was really off-putting to everybody around him. Even if he made zero contributions, even if he did not have any true accomplishments to his name, he wanted to be the best, to be legendary. He wanted to be seen as a force of nature. I think Anders' delusions of grandeur led him into doing what he did more than any other single thing. He truly believed that he would be the spark that would set off a continent reshaping revolution, that his actions would pave the way for the formation of a new far-right Christian nationalist European Knights Templar fucking shenanigan society. And so while it is important to disavow and critique the conspiracy theories that infect so many people's minds through the internet, it's also important to fight notions of ludicrous grandiosity and to address it directly. Anders Breivik, not special. And it's too bad he didn't have more people in his life telling him that in a rational, not bullying fashion. Like, seriously. That might sound harsh, but aren't parents supposed to tell their kids that they can do anything they set their minds to? No, not always. That's absurd. Support your kids' dreams to a point, but also don't be afraid to give them a reality check. That's also part of your job. I've done that with my kids. Kyler and Monroe, for example, at different points in their childhood, told me that they were very awesome at this or that sport. And I'm not trying to embarrass them with any details, but, when they said this, they were not awesome, and they understand that now. And they know they're awesome kids. They're great at some things, but they weren't good at that thing at that time. They were not anywhere close to being the best, or one of the best players on their respective teams when they had these thoughts. And their team sucked. Their teams were at the bottom of their leagues. And these were leagues that weren't even competitive to begin with. And I had to get real with them. Well, I didn't have to, but I did. But I wasn't a dick about it. I just explained to them that, if they wanted to be great, they would have to work a lot harder. I explained that they were not already great. If they were, they would be leading their teams in this or that statistical area. They would be inspiring their teams to play harder, get better, win more games. I shared stories of athletes who I've known who did excel and how hard they had to work to do so. Most importantly, I explained to them that if they really wanted to invest in practicing and getting better and putting in the time that it took to do that they could be the best, possibly, or very good, at least a lot better. But that would take a lot of work. I explained that I would help them put in that work, but they had to be the driving force for that, right? It was on them. Were they up to that challenge? Were they willing to get into the gym more, put extra hours outside of team practices on the court or the field, work on their fundamentals harder than their teammates, make more sacrifices, give it their all? Well, they were not. But now they understood that it took a lot more than they were willing to put in to do what they wanted to do. I wish Anders had someone in his life to teach him something like that, right? To tell him that, if he really wanted to be special, he should work harder in a practical way, and that he didn't need to do something revolutionary to be special. That's also important, right? That the best thing you can do to be special is just to be a decent person. Don't bully people. Help others when you can. Stand up for others. Be there for your friends and family. Help your neighbors when you can. That kind of shit. You don't have to be, the fucking team leader. You don't have to be the revolutionary. It's a bummer that Anders seemed to feel like he had to change the world and be the leader of some revolution to have some value. It sucks that both his parents sucked, that his family tree was loaded with a lot of mental illness. It sucked that he didn't have a parent who could help keep him in therapy, get him the proper meds. It sucked that his dad did not stick around. That probably had more to do with his, mental state than anything. How can we prevent more people from becoming like Anders Breivik? Have better parents. Don't verbally abuse your kids. Don't neglect your kids. Don't abuse your kids at all. Try to help kids, find value within themselves, show up for them, let them know they can, be special in their own way. I think the seeds for monsters like Anders are almost always planted in people's childhoods. So be nice to kids. But also, when society does end up with an Anders Breivik, sentence them to more than 21 years. What the fuck? Once they've become that broken, just put them down like the rabid dogs they are. There's no way to fix them at that point. Two last things now before the takeaways. Is Norway turning into the Islamist state that Breivik feared it would? No. Just over 3% of Norway is currently Muslim today. 3%. And that 3% they don't all worship Allah in the same way. Some are Shia, some are Sunni. A lot of the new immigrants in Norway are Catholic refugees, who are from Ukraine. That's the thing I think a lot of people forget about immigrants, especially when immigration is regulated, like it is in almost every place, like it is in Norway. Just like everyone else, not all immigrants agree on the same shit. They don't all agree on having the same religion or the same lack of religion. They don't all agree on what system of government they want. They're not like this big fucking cohesive group coming in to take over. That's just a weird fucking paranoid fallacy. As long as you're taking in immigrants from different parts of the world, which is almost always the case, there's going to be plenty of variety, and they're not going to all fucking band together and overthrow the government. And the other thing is, what about the island of Utoya? What's going on there today? Did Anders destroy it forever? No. It's gone back to being a place for summer camps. The Nordic Youth Council organized a camp on Utoya in July of 2023 and again in September of 2024. It appears they're going to have another one in 2025. The purpose of this camp, to strengthen young people's political involvement in the Nordic region and to facilitate a, exchange of knowledge. Kids of many different races from many different backgrounds and countries are attending have attended. Anders did not start a revolution. He actually just strengthened Norway's resolve to not become what he envisioned. Hail Nimrod. Time for the takeaways.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
Number 1, Anders Behring Breivik committed the deadliest peacetime atrocity in Norway, July 22nd, 2011. After setting off a bomb by the tower block that killed 8, he proceeded to the island of Utoya, where about 600 teenagers were gathered to hang out, attend talks and meetings, generally pursue their goals of becoming smart, well-rounded activists. They had no idea that Breivik planned for them to die, that 69 of them would be killed before July 22nd ended. Number 2, when it comes to what paved the way for Breivik's massacre, there are a couple of factors. There was one, his childhood, shaped in part by his mom's horrific upbringing and his dad's neglect. There was also Breivik's belief in fantasy-like scenarios amplified by his love of the World of Warcraft, where people get ahead if they're brave, skilled, able to mow down enemies. And there was his participation on online forums that advocated the Eurabia conspiracy theory, that the idea that Muslim immigrants are taking over Europe. Number 3, one of the main points of contention at Breivik's trial is whether or not he would be considered sane, or was whether or not he would be considered sane. An initial psychiatrist report diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia, but the symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia can look almost exactly like conspiracy theory thinking. Breivik himself wanted to be seen as sane because he wanted his crimes to be seen as necessary, but was he? Is that level of conspiracy thought a mental illness? Something interesting to think about as our country deals with this now on a daily basis. Number 4, Breivik is still in prison. He had spent the better part of the last 15 years, or he has spent the better part of the last 15 years complaining about how he has been treated. It seems like he's been treated very well. Compared to what most prisons across the world look like, compared to what a lot of people just living outside of prison look like. And even if he wasn't, he's not facing half the pain of the many lives he took, of the survivors who have had to watch their friends be shot to death in front of them, or now live with disabilities, painful disabilities, thanks to his mindless rampage. And number 5, new info. We've talked a lot about countries like Norway, or just, Europe at large, taking in refugees. Would it surprise you to learn that the country that houses the most refugees is not in Europe, not in America either? It's in the Middle East. In 2022, Iran reclassified its refugee system, which led to a major increase in legally documented refugees from 840,000 to over 3 million, though many had been living in the country for some time. Today, 3.76 million refugees are hosted in this country. Number 2 is Turkey, with 3.14 million refugees, then Germany at 2.66 million, and then Uganda at 1.65 million.
Timesuck top 5 takeaways.
Anders Breivik and the 2011 neo-Nazi Norway attacks have been sucked. Hopefully that made decent sense. I hate that brain fog you get with head colds. It's like once or twice a year. I'm so susceptible to those stupid things. Thank you to the Bad Magic Productions team for all the help in making Timesuck. Thank you once again to Queen of Bad Magic, Lindsay Cummins. Thanks to Logan Keith, helping to publish this episode and designing merch for the store at badmagicproductions.com. Thank you to Sophie Evans for her initial research this week. And thank you to the All-Seeing Eyes, moderating the Cult of the Curious private Facebook page, the Mod Squad, making sure Discord keeps running smooth, and everyone over on the Timesuck subreddit and the Bad Magic subreddit. So many sacks. Still doing so much cool shit within this community. And now let's head on over to this week's Timesucker updates.
Updates? Get your Timesucker updates.
I had no idea there were so many blazes in the world. So many Blaze updates this past few weeks. I had no idea we had so many listeners, either named Blaze, people who know a Blaze, when I was warning, everyone to stay away from anyone named Blaze. First up, Silly Sack Jack Weber sent in an email to bojangles@timesuckpodcast.com with the subject line of Blaze upon his glory. And he wrote, "Hey Dan, hope that worked. After listening to this week's episode, I had to go find this guy on Facebook I went to middle school with to show you. His name is Blaze Fury. Legal name. Honestly, just a regular old guy from what I remember, and I always wondered if him being so regular was a disappointment to his parents. If you're naming your kid Blaze Fury, and it's F-U-E-R-Y, but pronounced Fury, you want your child to be the fifth horseman of the apocalypse, right? Anyways, hail Nimrod, Lucifina Bojangles, and praise be to Triple M, Jack." Oh my God. Yeah, thank you, Jack. And thank you for including a link to this guy's Facebook page so I can check it out for myself. Blaze Fury. No shit. And and he does, and I don't mean this in an insulting way. I really don't. It's going to sound like an insult, but I really don't mean it that way. He just looks like the fucking most basic white guy you've ever seen. Not bad, just like so average. Just a basic white guy haircut. I mean, similar to my haircut. No tattoos that I can see. He's a nice looking dude. He's better looking than me, but not like a model. He just looks like he lives in the suburbs, drives a Kia, manages a Jiffy Lube, or does people's taxes or something. Again, I'm not trying to be insulting. He just looks like your basic American white guy. Does not look like a dude selling drugs or pimping at all. There's no fucking way he turned out like his parents were hoping. Next up, Deceiving Sack, Blaze Hanks, sent in a message with the subject line of, "My birth name is Blaze, you jackass." He wrote, "Did I get your attention? Okay, good, I lied. My name is Ross. But I did go to a school with a guy whose parents actually did name him Blaze." I'll leave out his name for obvious reasons. I like that the last guy didn't leave out his name, though. But his first name was indeed Blaze. To be honest, I don't remember him being all that memorable. Why is there so many fucking boring Blazes? He wasn't a bad guy or anything like that. Just not special in any way from what I could tell. Just sort of a dude who stayed in the background. So maybe some people who go by Blaze aren't so bad. But to be fair, I have no idea where he is now or what he's doing. Maybe he's an eccentric millionaire, or maybe he's a drug-fueled serial killer. I'm not sure. But I thought you'd find it interesting that not only did I know someone who went by the name of Blaze, but it was actually their government name. Funny world we live in, huh? Take it easy, Suckmaster. Thanks for all you and your team do. 3 out of 5 stars. Love you. Well, thank you, Ross. It is a funny world. And even though Ross was not a real Blaze, this next message was sent in by a real Blaze. Happy Sack Blaze fucking Moran sent in a message with the subject line of, "My government name is Blaze, you asshole." And this real Blaze writes, my real name on my ID is Blaze. I got a bone to pick. My name is Blaze, spelled that way. I'm a good guy. I don't have a cousin named Vibe. Sorry, although I do have a cousin with a new nickname now. Love all Bad Magic. I'm a long-time loyal listener. Even if you never see this, I'll still be here every Monday. Love y'all, Blaze. What a fucking great Blaze. And Blaze, not kidding, Blaze attached a photo of his ID. Yep, sure as shit, fucking Blaze. His email ID, Blaze. Doesn't seem like a piece of shit. You actually seem awesome, Blaze. And we had so many other Blaze emails. We got an email from somebody who dated a Blaze, who was just, again, boring. We got a lady whose little nephew is Blaze. He's too young to tell if he's going to be growing up to be a pimp or not. Fuck me. Guess I shouldn't have been so quick to judge a book by its Blaze. But still, when you meet a Blaze, maybe be a bit more skeptical than you are when you meet like a Bob or an Antoine or Jose or whatever. I don't know. I still feel like you should be safe around Blazes. It's the fucking quiet ones you got to worry about. All these boring Blazes. What are they hiding?
Thanks time suckers. I needed that.
We all did.
Well, thank you for listening to another Bad Magic Productions podcast. Scared to Death, Timesuck each week. Short Sucks and Nightmare Fuel and the Timesuck Scared to Death podcast feeds twice a month. Please don't try and start a race war this week, meat sacks. We got enough to fucking deal with right now. For fuck's sake. Let's try and be decent. Keep on sucking.
Bad Magic Productions.
Okay, now I want to play you my favorite Warcraft video of all time. This video was posted in 2011 that I'm playing here, but I'm 99% sure it's older than that. I think I first heard this video in like 2005 or 2006. I think that's when I first saw it on Facebook or something. It's a bunch of people playing an online campaign, and they're playing World of Warcraft 2004 edition. Sorry for the shitty early 2000s headset audio here. There's a dozen people playing. You know, they've been playing for hours, if not days, probably. You know, this guild, they're in a big campaign. They're planning this huge coordinated battle. And as they are playing, one player, Leroy Jenkins, is not paying attention. As they're getting ready, they're planning out this attack. He's fucking smoking weed. And when he's done smoking weed, he ignores all of their planning. And he jumps back into the game with way too much enthusiasm. And he just ruins things for everyone. And it still makes me laugh to hear how upset everybody gets that he ruins their game for them.
Okay, guys, these eggs have given us a lot of trouble in the past. Does anybody need anything off this guy, or can we bypass him?
I think Leroy needs something from this guy.
Fucking Leroy.
He needs those devout shoulders. Isn't he a paladin?
Yeah, but that'll help him heal better. He'll have more mana.
Leroy's checked out right now.
Christ. Okay.
They're worried about Leroy.
Well, what we'll do, I'll run in first, gather up all the eggs so we can kind of just, blast them all down with AoE. I will use Intimidating Shout to kind of scatter them so we don't have to fight a whole bunch of them at once. When my shout's done, I'll need Anthony to come in and drop his shout too, so we can keep them scattered.
Get all their spells figured out.
When his is done,
all their special attacks.
Run in and do the same thing. We're going to need Divine Intervention on our mages, so they can AE, so we can, of course, get them down fast, because we're bringing all these guys. I mean, we'll be in trouble if we don't take them down quick. I think it's a pretty good plan. We should be able to pull it off this time. What do you think, Abdul? Can you give me a number crunch real quick?
I'll just pause it really quick. Like, all the other characters other than Leroy, like, their little characters are moving around, kind of like in Fortnite when you're waiting in the lobby and, like, people aren't necessarily talking or whatever, but they're, like, moving around. And Leroy, his character is totally still this whole time, which I strongly assume, they feel like, based on what they say later, he takes a break to maybe go to the bathroom and probably smoke some weed.
Yeah, give me a sec. I'm coming up with 32.33
he's not paying attention.
Percentage of survival.
Oh, that's a lot better than we usually do.
All right, chums up.
Ready, guys?
Let's do this. Leroy Jenkins!
Okay, so really quick before I play more, all of a sudden his character starts to move and he just immediately runs in to start fighting so many monsters. And then all these other characters are standing around like, what? Why the fuck is he doing that? And then this happens.
Oh my god, he just ran in.
Save him! Oh, geez, stick to the plane!
Oh, Jesus. Let's go.
Now they're all running and they're panicking.
Stick to the plan, Shove.
Stick to the plane.
And they get massacred.
Oh, fuck.
Give me Divine Intervention.
Hurry up.
Shout. He's saying I can't cast. I can't move. Am I lagging, guys?
I can't move. What the hell? I can't AE. Oh my god.
The eggs keep spawning. More respawning.
I don't think you can cast with that shit.
Oh my god.
Shout.
Take it off. I got it. Take it off.
Come on, stay down.
Oh my god.
God damn it, Leroy.
God damn it.
Leroy, you moron. Leroy.
This is ridiculous.
Dumbass. I'm down, forking down. God damn it.
This is I got killed before I could remove on this. God. Oh, Spiffy, res us.
Why do you do this shit, Leroy?
I'm trying.
It's not my fault.
Who's soul stoned?
He's still stoned.
We do have a soul stone up, don't we?
Oh no, we have a soul stone.
You got soul stones?
Warlock.
Oh god.
Oh, for...
Great job, for Christ's sake. Leroy, you were just stupid as hell.
Okay, so maybe Leroy wasn't stoned. Maybe I heard soul stone. I added that he was stoned. but I just love how pissed off at him. I mean, who knows how many hours were spent getting ready for that big fucking battle. And then he just goes full on Leroy Jenkins. So have a great week, everybody. Don't be Leroy Jenkins. Or maybe do. Sounds like Leroy had a great time.